And on the first day, the DM said, let there be light. Today we're talking world building on Double Crit. I'm Matt.
I'm Tom.
Just to confuse people.
Let's jump right in.
So, basics. Where, what, when, why, how. I almost think that we probably should skip down to the next one and go, up or down.
Yeah.
Because it'll kind of help make the determination on the where.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's funny that like the very core principle of world building is like the first thing they teach you in like year 3, how to write a story class. I think you need to really nail those points. But yeah, let's start with ways to build from top down versus bottom up. Let's start there.
Yeah. So, again, I think this is one of those occasions where you and I can't approach from different angles most of the time.
Very different, I would say.
Probably with a little bit more variation on my part than the encounter building that we've sort of touched on before, where I'm more often to pick up and go from bottom up.
Yeah.
So to give people an idea, when we're talking about top down and bottom up, it's bottom up, for an example, would be you maybe make a village or you make the first dungeon or something, and then you build each piece of world and sort of Lego it together over time as you build up. And there's no reason why you can't do a bit. You can't do a bit of that with a top down approach. In fact, you're almost guaranteed to do it anyway.
That's right. Yeah.
But the top down approach is more of you build a world, at least in the broad terms, and then place things that within it. The differences are really a question of workload and how much free reign you want to let your players are going to have in terms of their sort of starting locations and races, things like that.
I mean, for me, it really depends whether you're going to write a plot and the players are going to start in X area, or whether you're going to run how I tend to run these days. And maybe you have a meta plot, but you don't have like a plot that directly impacts the players right off the bat, and you let them have a bit more control.
Yeah, and the different types of world building, sort of lend themselves differently to each one. And it's not to say that one of them actually aligns with the other one, because surprisingly, and I used to think that it would align one way or the other a lot more. I've sort of found that it doesn't. That both have some good things and bad things that lend to those different types.
Definitely, both have their limits and their benefits. I mean, if you're building the whole world, I mean, that gives you a lot more control, but it also means there's a whole mountain load more of work to do. Even if you even if you go the weighted route that I do, which is very, very, very loosey-goosey, there's still a lot more work than you would think.
Yeah, and it just like minor things as well, like stuff that you might not even think of straight off the bat, like, oh shit, we got clerics. Now I'm going to make gods, or something along those lines. So really, that's the approach. I suppose, speaking from my side of the general gist of how it ends up working, from a top-down sort of build, I like it from a case of it gives me a firm idea, sort of what's going on in the world that can impact upon where the players are. That helps keep me grounded, because I generally won't build out a whole world. That'd be insane.
Yeah, I usually go like a country or like an area.
I would generally fill out sort of the general, so the country that, or geographical area that the players are likely to start in, and a pretty decent idea of their immediate neighbours, and then just a general smattering of the rest of the world in general. If I've got a map or something, I'll generally at least fill it out so that if I've not got anything written down specifically for what sort of like a kingdom area is or something like that, I'll have at least got the border demarked.
Yeah, well, for me, I usually write the city names or like the point of interest names. I may not have anything at all written for that point of interest unless the players specifically start asking questions. But until that point, it probably doesn't even exist in my notes, if I'm honest.
Yeah, and to a big, even from a top-down approach like I tend to build with, that's all I'll probably get to. As we sort of get narrower again, I think there's every chance that I'm sitting here talking about this and going, I'm a more top-down approach, where really I'm probably a build from the middle. In the sense that once we sort of hit if you're using current like population centers and things like that as a determinant, I'd probably build a state.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty well fleshed out, major centers of power, major organisations, and then in the towns I'd have sort of your major NPCs and all of that fleshed out in advance.
Yeah.
And like I wouldn't build down to little Timmy, the beggar kid, unless it's going to be a particularly important plot point. But yeah, I would have that all sort of going on. So
there's people out there that fill shops and things. I don't do that. I don't do that. Like I might have a character who might be a crafter or a blacksmith or something that I'll mention, and then if the players investigate it, I'll expand it. For me, a lot of it comes down to, unless the players ask to interact with it, I don't deal with it.
And even to a certain degree, I jump onto that bandwagon as well.
Mm-hmm.
The like as you said, using the shops as an example, I generally wouldn't fill out a shop. The difference on that maybe is if I had like a travelling merchant come through town or something like that, where it was a sort of a plot point and it's something that they might be really a case of, they're really going to pay attention to this because it's an unusual thing.
Yeah.
I'd probably have at least of the big ticket sort of items that they're carrying, and then just go general wares. But again, I suppose the biggest point I make from how I top down approach is really just the case of I like to have things impacting on where the players are that aren't just local events.
Yeah, definitely.
And it helps for this random thing. If it gets a bit stale, here's somebody comes through with a story or something. I suppose one of the things that's interesting about Stars Without Number, which I'm running now, instead of saying planning to run now, is that it gave a lot of sort of support to that style of thing of having those interactions.
Yeah.
In the background, and a lot of support for that, whereas before I was sort of doing it off the top, and it's given me some interesting ideas for how I might do it in the future.
Yeah. The Stuff Without Numbers background stuff seems really, really, really well fleshed out and really interesting too. And there's definitely games out there like that have like I'm trying to think of a word that's not crutch, but like a system, I guess, in place to help build the world.
Definitely.
And I think if you look for the right tools, you'll definitely find them.
Yeah, and particularly if you can find something that's got a bit of a following in terms of a game system. If they've got a strong mechanical assistance in the background, there's a fairly decent chance you'll be able to find these days like an online generator or something like that that'll put it together. Like for instance, for Stars Without Number, I use Sectors Without Number is the online tool. And that just pretty much does all of the random rolling for you and builds the sector, and then you just go through. And for the one that I've just gone through. I've gone, all right, I'm changing names, and I'll make it. That gives me that idea, but switch out that one and things like that. So it gives you sort of a shell from which to build from.
Yeah.
So I suppose touching on that is a good point of you can straddle a difference between building everything yourself and like if there's tools and things out there for it, or you've seen like a world in something else. Feel free to take it and reskin a couple of bits and pieces of it. Right? Yeah. People are probably not, your players almost certainly aren't going to notice unless you're bleedingly obvious about it.
Even if they do, most other people are pretty chill, like tropes are tropes for a reason.
Yeah.
That's going to be my tagline by the end of the series, I think. Tropes are tropes for a reason. Like people use them because they're a good storytelling device. So it's not, don't like shamelessly steal everything of a plot, but if you're going to use some stuff, who cares?
What is it? Good writers borrow, great writers steal.
That's right. I mean, I've done it before. I've played in a campaign and I've thought of a way to do it better, and I'm like, a way that in my opinion, I thought it would be better. And I was like, well, I'm just going to try it out and see how it goes. And I've ran with it several times. Yeah.
Hell, we've even with the same with the same GM, we've played the same effective city 3 or 4 times over. Like realistically, largely the same plot. We might focus on different areas of it, and there's a bit of difference here and there when we've played in that world. But so even it being a bit samey with something people have done before, one, they're probably going to play differently to what they did the last time.
That's right.
It's like re-going through games and playing a different class, or
probably don't run verbatim exactly the same thing you ran last time. That would be a terrible choice.
Don't just pick up the adventure path and rerun it again. not again, I'm not saying that don't run an adventure path. I'm saying don't run it verbatim the same again. But yeah, so
something we should touch on right now though, like running in an established setting doesn't necessarily mean that you don't do any world building, and it definitely shouldn't mean that.
Yeah, you shouldn't be approaching an existing setting with the idea of, I don't need to do it.
Yeah,
because something is going to sneak up on you.
You still
probably immediately.
That's right. You still need to sort of build your players into the story, which is something we'll sort of reach further down towards the end of the topic. But you still need to sort of craft the world to suit your players, and you still need to focus on different things. So you still need to do world building, even if you run in an existing setting.
And look, the chances of you running even in an existing setting in like a specific set of locales that are exactly the same as wherever you're drawing the inspiration from. The first one to jump to mind is, playing in the Star Wars universe, because we've done a lot of it over the years. There's plenty of planets, cities, areas, shops, people. You're going to have to do all that. Where it really lends itself, where using an existing world sort of lends itself there is really a case of some of the heavier lifting in terms of the deeper background.
That's right. You can skip this histories portion of making your story to a degree, and you can sort of. It also eases the players in a little bit easier. Like there's less of a learning curve for the players as well, because you need to teach them the setting, especially with something like Star Wars. 90% of the people at your table are probably going to watch Star Wars, so you don't really need to introduce them to the core concepts and the core principles of the setting.
So some of the specifics might escape them, but that just works for players too. I still think that the best game of Dark Heresy I ever played was when I knew 3 parts of bugger all about that.
That's right.
Well, you're just as stupid as I was supposed to be about what's going on.
Exactly. It was awesome. I feel exactly the same. You played that setting and you played that world, but it was so much better when you didn't know anything.
Yeah. And I suppose it's worth touching on there as well that you don't need to, and I'd almost say just don't, but some people do enjoy it, is don't just drop like a 5,000 page history of your world on your players. No. One, their characters probably aren't going to have that knowledge, so there's no point in it anyway. Broad strokes overview with a couple of key things that stand out is probably the sort of most that you'll need, and your local history within 1 or 2 generations of whatever's living there is probably the most that you need to really have bedded down, and even then you probably would still just give them a bit of a...
I usually go with a timeline.
Yeah, timelines are good.
Because they can just skim it.
Yeah.
And usually I don't include anything that's not like a major event. Like there is things that would have happened that weren't major events that I might have a note about it or something, but...
Yeah, it's not like if there was one year where there was a bit of a famine, it probably didn't rate a mention, but if there was a major famine over 5 to 10 years, someone's going to remember that and have a note of it.
That's right.
Or there'll be records of it that you might find, or...
It's just sort of picking and choosing the right facts to give to the players. Yeah. Like your Start to That Numbers game, for example, was perfect. He sort of gave us a general overview of the political landscape in the area that we're in, and then he gave us a note, like a A4 page, which had probably 3 paragraphs on it, which explained the worlds that we were from, and that was it. We didn't need more than that.
No, it helped nail in your mind sort of what you were looking at. I'm hoping it helped in terms of you guys as players who had sort of made a rough assessment of where you thought you'd be from. Yeah. Because before that point, you'd sort of just been given like maybe a 3-word overview of what a planet was like, and go, no, yeah, that sounds like where I'd be from, and it might have given you just a bit more there. And my intent with that one sort of one page up was to give you enough to go, yeah, this is the general feel of the world, and then as we go forward for you guys to be able to go nuts and go, oh well, I studied at XYZ Institute, and I just go, yeah, that's where it is.
Well, it's cool too from the perspective of that most of us from different sort of areas in the same local cluster, but most of us are from different places in that local cluster, so we have the advantage of being able to lean on each other's player knowledge as much as our characters would. Our characters know the information, but being able to lean on it and be like, hey, Rob, what's your homeworld like? We're heading there. What happens there? What should we trade? What should we trade to there? And he can then be like, well, I read on my sheet here that they're in a civil war, and you should trade munitions or medical supplies. It'll probably get you a pretty good profit, and that's what we did. So, it sort of helps in that regard too, where you can feel a little bit more immersed in your character because you have enough of the knowledge about your planet and your background to be able to give advice to the other players.
And I suppose that sort of touches off to another thing, and I honestly can't remember if we've got that further down on our list of discussions, is the idea of giving people different information within the party.
It is further down our list, but it's something we should probably bring up now as well. We can touch on it greater then, but in terms of information, you don't want to info dump people.
No, so if you can split it up and it's important, that helps a lot getting around that info dump idea.
That's right. Well, if everyone reads one page, that's 5 pages of information you've handed to the group.
Yeah.
Maybe assuming you have 5 people, but number of people times pages, you handed out a lot more than 1 page to everyone.
Yeah.
And they can all draw on it for different reasons.
Yeah. And it's, I found it to be more digestible. I've tried in the past giving you some, again, initially what I thought what I was giving people was, not too bad. But, now I look back at it and go, bugger that.
Yeah.
I'm amazed anyone read it.
Yeah, it's funny. You sort of think back to when your earlier campaigns where you have tried to create your own world and the amount of information you try to give out.
Because you think it's all important when you write it.
That was a big That's a huge misstep.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan. It's a movie philosophy and it doesn't quite translate perfectly, but show don't tell. You don't need to give them all of the information up front. You can just have the NPCs trickle the information through.
Yeah.
And even the NPCs.
Yeah, and sometimes not even characters at all. If you're one that I've been a big fan of is just before we finished up with our online group, we did a world building exercise, which we'll likely touch on later in more detail. But one of the things that came out of that was, we know that this particular city has changed hands several times. So one of the things that it was immediately ticking in my mind, I wasn't running the game that went into that world, but if I had been, it was already firing my stuff up to go, all right, well, there's going to be differences in architecture here compared to another city. There's going to be, the city looks a little bit patchwork because this building's been built like this and this has been built like this, and you're getting a real clash. And sort of that stuff in the background is just as efficient of way of getting information across that, something definitely has shifted in this town and get people potentially interested in that, and then they can look into it if they want to or not. And it gives you options for as well in battlefields and things like that. If you're having those sort of set piece encounters and stuff to go, well, it actually makes a difference. You've gone from a thin walled, old wooden building into a new stonework building. All of a sudden, people aren't shooting you through walls. Yeah, it gives you those sort of options as well. And you can scatter that stuff in, the old one of you moving through the dungeons and you move from flagstone floors and everything into more natural caverns, and it might even have happened gradually, the floors are still done but the walls are a bit, and that signals a change in thinking amongst players and things as well. And it can come from your history.
That's right, and it makes sense for it to come from the history as well. If you have a city that has a patchwork of architecture, like you said, that very quickly does it should hopefully evoke to the players that the city's changed hands a lot and they'll see a lot of multicultural sort of ideas, because assumably whilst the city changes hands, the people still have to live there, because you can't just up and leave your life because the government changed.
Or conversely, if they're getting in there and they're finding everyone is the current inhabitants, it should hopefully in somebody's mind fire the question of, well, what happened to all the other ones? And depending on what the type of campaign or thing you're running, that could be an important point as well.
That's right, yeah. Especially if that's pertaining to anything to do with the plot, like if you're trying to overthrow a evil empire or something, having little things like that come up. You rock up to the town, it's very elven, but there's humans living there, and it's okay, what's going on here?
Exactly.
There's definitely things you can do like that add a lot of personality to your campaign, add a lot of personality to the set pieces in your campaign.
Yeah, and that's sort of where I was coming from before, where I was saying that's the sort of thing that I like having from my top-down approach. And you can do it if you know that for the specific city that people are in, but having that knowledge for when they decide to go travelling, that this city's flipped a couple of times, and like a major events in the history, it lets you do that sort of stuff right off the bat. You can do it anyway, but it helps you have a reason for it.
That's where it helps to have a fairly decent, at least continent map.
Yeah.
Because you can see where the borders are, and you can see what kind of cities may have traded a few times, and where the war fronts would be, because they're probably going to fight over land that's usable. So you can very quickly look at the map and be like, okay, well, here's where the sort of wars would happen.
And if you've got things like mountain ranges and stuff, the gaps and that's where you're going to see one, you're probably more fortified towns and things, and also that's probably where there's going to be old battlefields and things like that.
That's right.
Because that's where it is, and I suppose that's sort of touching on to. I think we've sort of moved into what we've got down as like adding personality.
Yeah.
At this point, to the world, and then this is a big one is when you're looking at borders and things, particularly if you've got a map. If you've got just a general idea in your head and you're sort of theatre and the minding the world. I'd suggest doing a scratch map at least.
Yeah.
Just so that you don't forget your theatre of the minding in advance.
Even if they don't have to have like the, like an atlas version of your world.
No.
But just like some drawing on a piece of paper or a napkin or whatever you've got nearby that are roughly what you're looking at.
Yeah. But if you've gone and got yourself like a world map, or like there's plenty of them just floating around on the internet.
There's generators that just generate random ones for you. I've often used them in the past.
And there's plenty of times where I've just joined a map that's unlabeled or something and gone from there. If you've got something like that, it's probably worth your time to sit down and have a think about your borders. Mm-hmm. Particularly if you're taking the top-down approach, I'd suggest it as well for maybe after a couple of sessions into a bottom-up approach as well, to actually sit down and have that thought, because if they've got, your player's got 2 or 3 levels on them, they're sort of going to get to the point where they're going to either try and leave, or all of a sudden they're going to start feeling constraints about being where they are.
Yeah.
Particularly if you're using a D&D analog or something along those lines.
There gets a point where you start to get to a certain level where you need to sort of branch out because you're getting too big for this little podunk town.
Yeah. Some places can get away. Like if you're in a big enough locale to start with, you might not see that as much.
Yeah.
For instance, if you start an urban campaign in Waterdeep.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
In Forgotten Realms from D&D, for those unfamiliar, it's a mega city. You can probably get away from it. But if you're just starting in some podunk little village, like I mentioned, like by level 2 or 3, they're probably going to if you're going anywhere near to like recommended coins, cash to leveling value or in equipment sort of assumptions, they're not going to be able to supply themselves from that podunk little thing. And one, they may not think to try and leave as players and start trying to get stuff, and they're like, oh, this is annoying, and then they'll go, oh, well, we must have to leave. But you also have options there for drawing them out too, with they're probably known by about level 3 or 4. Maybe not like globally, but the next village over or the main town that all the villagers trade with or something probably knows about them, and someone's going to send someone out and go, hey, we heard about you dealing with the goblins over there. We're not sure, but we think something else is going on. You want to have a look for us? Yeah, so that's where a little bit more of that top-down approach also helps out as well, because if you know that that's there, that there's 2 or 3 major towns around and you're close to border with X right at the start, it gives you a lot of food for being able to go, oh, well, there's an issue. You can use that as there's some sort of border skirmish or something like that, and it all feels like real when it's not just sort of insert monster X again, which you can fall into. There's nothing to say that you can't make those sort of decisions as you go forward, but if you know about that in advance,
it helps a lot.
Yeah, and you can start dropping seeds for it too.
You don't need to have that all planned out like session 1, but it's got to start building through. You don't want to don't front load your prep so much that it's tedious.
Yeah.
If you're doing more than it's very much personal choice how much prep is enough prep. I mean, you do a decent amount, I do pretty much bugger all. My most recent campaign, I probably put the most prep into it that I've put into a campaign in a very long time, and I think I put about 6 hours worth of prep into generating not the town so much, but what's going on in the town. And it was 6 hours over a very long period. I've been planning the campaign for months and months and months and chopped and changed a few things at a time. But I think if you put too much prep into sort of a small area, you've wasted a lot of time because they're probably not going to get through the finer points of it.
Yeah. I'd say if you're looking and you're enjoying your world building and you're going to spend a lot of time in it, to ration that time a little bit more towards a bigger space, and branch out rather than getting really, really detailed where you are, because as you mentioned, a lot of that detail players aren't going to access, and you can probably wing it on the fly if you've got a good idea sort of about the town that you're dealing with. Yeah, which hopefully you do if that's where you're choosing to run.
A small amount of it will come down to who's in your group as well. So if your players love to just kill stuff and collect loot, there's not really much point focusing on the big story, not the big story, like the the finer details. Like they don't really care who the mayor is. They just care that the mayor's pointing at the next thing to kill. So you don't want to focus too much on those little finer points. The political intrigue doesn't really matter to them as so much as one side wants to kill the other side, so they're hired.
Who's got the most coins?
Yeah. So, maybe write a little bit about it for yourself so you've got something to read back on when they inevitably surprise you and start asking questions.
But yeah, it's
don't
probably
write the whole plot.
No, definitely not. But conversely, if you're playing with a group that you've played with for a while and you know that they're going to be, a little bit more in the weeds in terms of just going, enjoy moving around and having that, more particularly political or investigatory bent to them than a just straight up combat party or a dungeon delve party, because again, those are separate things. And I do see that conflated a lot, and it's probably something we touch on at some point in a future episode, is that just because it's a dungeon party or a dungeon delve party doesn't necessarily mean it's a combat party.
Yeah, for sure.
In the sense of murder hobos, which is a concept I recommend everybody be familiar with, because occasionally your players are going to turn into that.
Yeah. Bring it back to your current campaign, as in terms of dungeon delving. Like, the group wants to explore. I've kind of guided the group that way, I guess, but no one else really came up with a good idea. I wanted to sort of explore the ruins of the last age, and find lost tech and things. And so I guess we're kind of a dungeon party at that point, in a lot of ways. Yeah. But at the same time, we're also interested in the world. So we're not your classic murder hobo dungeon party. We're like
we're going to this weird place to look around and find stuff, as opposed to we're going down there to kill things. And I suppose it's still technically getting fat loot, but
yeah. But for a purpose, like we have things in mind that we want to do and goals we want to achieve, and it's just it's more than just go there to kill things to get loot, to kill the next thing, to get loot, to kill the next thing.
Yeah, you've got a targeted goal of what you want. You may or may not find the stuff you want there. You'll probably find stuff that's at least adjacent to it.
Yeah.
Or something without sort of going too deep into it, but you could. There's direction and purpose there, and if you've got a group that's got that sort of thing going on for it, it behooves you to have those sort of ideas in a world building sense of what's going on around.
Yeah. Why is the thing there?
Why is this ruin here? Like, is there a reason for this ruin being here? Because if you're just doing a random, we're creating a dungeon sort of and going for a dungeon delve quest line, at least to start with, for everyone to get a feel for their characters, and then you might branch off or something. It's worth having that initial sit down and think, either from top down or bottom up. Your starting location is probably going to need a fairly decent chunk to it, just so you know what's going on there. But have that thought in your head of why the location is there. Yeah. To sort of circle back to that where, why, what, who sort of question that we kind of brushed over before, without realising that we probably should have had a bit more grounding in what we were discussing. Because that'll help you fill stuff out on the fly. Like, if you know that this citadel was put here to deal with this problem and it became a ruin, you don't even really need a reason for it to become a ruin, because you can probably get that from the reason why it was built.
That's right.
Like, you probably got sacked at some point, or that enemy disappeared and all of a sudden there was no use for this thing, so it was abandoned and slowly fell into disrepair. But that'll let you know the sort of things to leave behind in there, and
items and equipment and clues, and you know what kind of languages are going to be around. And
exactly, it gives you that sort of grounding, and it's not a big prep. You don't need the whole history of the conflict or anything. Just even if you just sit down and go, the tower was here to defend against orcs. Just random standard bad guy out of the D&D verse / Tolkien verse, and just go, well, okay, it's probably going to have certain things that go with it. If they find weapons, it's probably going to have a bent towards fighting, if not orcs, at least humanoids. It lets you flesh that sort of stuff out on the fly really quickly. And it lets you get an idea for layout as well, if you're somebody who maps out a dungeon well in advance, or even just a little bit in advance. Like, if you know it's there from a defensive perspective, it's going to be set up differently than if it's just like a staging area for assaulting out from.
That's right. Or it's just like a generic chapel type deal.
Yeah.
The other one for me is, like, in terms of, if you're setting up a game for a group of people that want to murder stuff, or a group of people that want to explore the world more in depth. You don't necessarily have to rewrite your whole campaign if you've got a new group. So an example for me is like the murder hobos get hired by the mayor to go and kill the camp of goblins. Now, they get there and kill the goblins and they don't really look too much into it. They've killed the goblins and they move on with their lives. The other group goes there and kills the goblins and they capture one and they're like, I don't know why the goblins coming and attacking the farmers. And the goblins are like, oh, we've got to get food because the food in the hills isn't there anymore because there's a bigger, angrier tribe monster thing up there that we've got to deal with. So we decided we come and pick on the easier target.
Yeah, move on down the line.
That's right. And, that plot can work for both groups and it can be easily expanded for both groups, but in different ways. So you put more, obviously, once the goblins get taken out, well, what's to stop the big bad from the mountains to coming down and attacking the farmers? And the mayor's like, go and attack the big thing, go and deal with that now.
Yeah, you've done this, but now these things rocked up. Or they can get the jump on it.
That's right. So, depending on your group, you don't need to necessarily tailor your whole plot around what kind of players you have. It's just something to be aware of and probably something to invest a little bit of time in talking to your players. And, it's going to happen. It's going to come out over games more than talking, most likely, because I've met a lot of people that are like, I'm not a power gamer, and then they sit at a table and you're like, yeah. Really? How many hours did you spend making that character?
Yeah. I suppose it's probably worth pointing out on that fact as well there that things change, really, from just because a character is even built and designed in a particular way. Once it hits the table, nothing survives contact with the table, let alone contact with the enemy.
That's right.
So once you sit down and go, session zeros and things like that tend to ameliorate that a bit.
A little, but not a lot though, because how many times have you sat down at a table? Like I know I've done it multiple times, and I'm like, I'm going to make this character, and he's going to be like a good guy, and he's going to slowly transition into being evil, and then I sit down and play him, and I'm like, no, I don't really want to go that transition anymore.
Yeah. Or conversely, you sit down and go, well, the party we're in is actually a little bit darker than I initially anticipated, so we're going to speed up this timeline.
Yeah, that's right.
And it happens. Both from what happens in game and just from what's in the party. It's probably the big thing.
Yeah. So a big one to touch on, I think, is you want to have content in your world custom to your players. And we talked about that a little bit a minute ago, but I more mean specifically like, your players have things on their sheets, so you know what they want to do. If you have a look at their skills, if you have a look at their feats, if you have a look at their just overall stats, it starts to build a bit of a picture as to what they want to do in the game. And that's really valuable information, because if someone's got 3/4 of their skill points invested in persuasion, they want to talk. They want to have that in the game. So you need to make sure that you tailor the game in some respect to include that. So writing is another good one, as you just mentioned. They want to have that option. So then you've got to sort of think about, well, how am I going to get that? How am I going to have that in the game? What's that going to actually look like? But it's all worthwhile stuff. Like, there's no point everyone coming up to the table with their character. You tell them to go make their own characters, come to the table, play whatever you want, and they show up, and then you're like, cool. None of that matters.
Here's what's happening.
You can obviously do that, and there is a place for that in some groups, but I wouldn't recommend it. As a player, I don't find it fun.
I suppose the only caveat I would add on to that is feel free to go forth and do that sort of thing if you give the players a heads up at the front.
Yeah.
Say right off the bat, I'm going to do something off the walls random that's going to have nothing to do with your characters. So build what you want to do, but beware that the world or area you're in is not necessarily going to be conducive to that. And some of the fun is you going to be trying to lever your skills into that world. Especially
like lever your skills in creative ways to overcome the weaknesses in your character, or the weaknesses that you've left yourself open to.
It's not necessarily a case of I'm going to deliberately set out and do it. It's just a case of you're sitting down in this world, and it is a live world, and you might end up somewhere where something that you've written down doesn't matter. Rest assured that eventually you'll probably find a way that it matters. It just may not be immediately apparent. So don't expect everything on your character sheet to
it shouldn't matter all the time. That's for sure. Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Everything on your character sheet shouldn't matter all the time, but it's definitely something you should invest some time into if you read the skills and stuff.
And it's a good chance to have that conversation with your party as well. I think we touched on it. We definitely touched on it with character creation, having some discussions there about this is the sort of world that I'm building. Like, this is a game where there's a heavy undead flavour to it. So, you might want to build your characters towards that.
I mean, sometimes your characters will come to the table after having that discussion and they'll build against that.
Yeah, specifically.
But that could be an intentional thing, and it's probably worth talking to them quickly about it. And if it is intentional, cool.
Yeah, because there's nothing wrong with deciding how it could be some of the most interesting play that you've had in a long time to go, oh, okay, well, we're in a zombie apocalypse sort of scenario, like an undead apocalypse going on in D&D, and someone deliberately comes to the table with, a character that's most certainly not suited for it.
No, like right.
It's all based around, maybe ranged combat, for example. So it's all piercing. Mm-hmm. But they know that when they're making that decision, that undead's coming up, and you're going, and you probably pull them aside and go, "Are you sure?" Mm-hmm. And then if they go, "Yes, this is part of what I'm going for," I'm like, "Yep."
Yeah, it can be fun to overcome adversity, overcome weakness as a player.
Yeah. And just because you can't see where they're coming from doesn't mean they haven't got a reasoning behind it. Like, for instance, they might be playing that sharpshooter character, and you go, well, shooting the zombies with arrows isn't going to do all that much. Mm-hmm. But their whole thing is coming in and going, oh, sweet, I know we're set in this town, it's a port city, there's going to be stuff in cargo nets and things everywhere, and I'm here to just shoot cargo nets and make them fall on, all the contents fall on people.
That's right. And sometimes it becomes a matter of, they might have found a piece of equipment that you haven't, and they might talk about it later. Like, for example, Pathfinder piercing used to be a problem, but you can get blunt arrows now that do bludgeoning damage. There's things that they could use to overcome things. So it's just interesting to let them do it.
Because if your players have spent the time building a particular way, it's probably worth giving them the benefit of the doubt that there's going to be a way that it works. Mm-hmm. And if after a couple of sessions it doesn't look like it's working out, maybe have the conversation with them then again of going, hey, is this turning out how you thought? Mm-hmm. And having that bit of flexibility, go, well, maybe we'll just do a quick rejig if you want to. Mm-hmm. Obviously don't take the tack that this character, never approach it from a this character is shit perspective. Mm-hmm. And never assume that they are going to make a change or a suggested change, but come in and give them that opportunity, because it might be that they didn't quite understand something you were describing. Mm-hmm. Like you might say, or they might have missed a word. Like if you've just had a quick conversation before, in a chat before playing on the Monday, and they've built their character on the Sunday, and you had the conversation on the Saturday. If you've said zombie apocalypse, they may have only picked up apocalypse as part of that.
That's right.
And built all around, like survival scavenging as opposed to survival. I'm going to have to hit things in the head with a sword. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it could just be that they've misheard or misinterpreted something. Like the amount of times we've had laughs and commiserations at a table when someone's just not realised what's really going on.
The classic gazebo story is also another good example.
Yep.
They just misheard and didn't quite understand, and they're trying to fight a gazebo. There's plenty of stories out there where
that's
people
still pretty funny.
Yeah.
The one that jumps to mind was that we just had a player once, and there was a description that there was a boat that was chained to a wharf, and then the river had flooded, and the description of it being sort of stuck up on one end because the chain was still attached to the wharf underwater, and it was dragging the nose of the boat down underneath, and the player just couldn't get it. It was just somewhere along there, their mind had made a chink to go to a certain direction, and it just wasn't making sense to them. And like half an hour later, they're like, head on table, like, I get it now. and you'll get stuff like that happens all the time. And if it happens during character creation, it can have that effect. So, and that does tie into world building in the sense of, if you've got a built world, whether it be small scale built world or large scale built world, it does behoove you to check in with the players and go, hey, this is sort of the world, or if you see something going off on a weird angle, just to clarify what they think. Mm-hmm. And go, and don't just phrase it, go, what the hell are you thinking? Ask the question of, I think we've got some sort of disconnect here because you seem to be going off on what I consider a weird tangent. Do we have a different understanding of what we're talking about here? And feel free to shamelessly steal from your player when they say, I was thinking about going down this line. Mm-hmm. And you go, I hadn't thought about that.
That's right.
Yeah.
I love stealing from the players. I do it all the freaking time. So my players sometimes are scared to talk at the table. Like, I'm not saying that. What if he does?
Shut up. Stop talking about the great old ones.
Pretty much. So in terms of doing custom content for your players, don't do it at the exclusion of other players. So don't have like one player as the big thing that needs to be dealt with. Don't have like the chosen one at your table.
Yeah.
Because that's lame.
You can have the chosen party, but be careful with that, because if somebody dies, then you've got an interesting conundrum.
Right.
It's similar to time travel, in the sense that, well, you need to be really clear, because in terms of how your time travel is working, if it's reasonable for the players to know so. Because if they're going, oh, well, in the future I survived, therefore I'm free to do whatever I want now,
right.
and then you know, they cop an arrow in the face or something, and you go, either A, you're going to go, oh, well, you copped an arrow in the face, too bad, see ya. Or, and they're potentially going to be on the other side and go, oh, well, obviously I survived this, and then get the rug pulled out of them when they don't. So, yeah, having that sort of idea is important to be aware of. But as you said, look, chosen people were always a thing that I used, particularly when I was first starting out. You guys are the ones to solve this problem. And one of two things invariably happens. Someone dies, and all of a sudden, well, is there a new chosen one? Like, who's this new party member? Are they, like, we are chosen by the gods, oh, and here's Jeff. Or they ignore the problem. Something happens, they forget that they're, like, the impetus for that problem is lost, or they get despondent and go, oh, yeah, we can't do anything, the problem's too bad. I think I played in a game once where we were effectively playing against reskinned gnolls, but because we had a really shitty run of rolls and they had some really good rolls, it was half of the party pretty much went, well, we can't deal with this shit. We'll go to the nearby city and go, hey, this is your problem now, and go do something else. Like, everyone else is sort of there. It's like, well, the argument makes sense from both perspectives. One, it's like, well, we as players know that, you know, we rolled the dice pretty poorly, and it's a bit of meta knowledge to go, well, we rolled it pretty poorly, maybe we just chalk it up as a go, all right, we know better now, we know a little bit more about their fighting style, we'll go back in and do this. Or it's completely reasonable also to have the argument of, well, as far as our characters are aware, they just got their ass kicked by these things. And a lot of that sort of comes down to some, you know, how descriptive your combat is. Yeah. Because if you're GMing and you're describing it for your players as things like, yeah, you almost get the hit in, as opposed to just, oh no, you miss. Yeah. I mean, those are two very separate sort of ideas, and it can help convey a different thought process.
Right. Yeah, definitely.
So, you know, something to keep track of, but, you know, it doesn't take much to set perceptions in the world.
No.
And having a good plan of either your immediate surroundings or the greater world as a whole, or both, depending on how you want to do it, something there for grounding to help you is going to help out.
How do you feel about using big names in worlds, like big NPCs, Elminster in Forgotten Realms, Darth Vader in Star Wars?
I vacillated on these ones a little bit between, yeah, you Butte, and hell no, keep it away from me. I think the choice you really need to be careful of is, all right, I want to use this thing, why? And having that decision clear in your mind that this is going to be here for this reason, and is it A, going to take agency off of the players, and B, is it going to make sense? Because, yeah, everyone might get a bit of a thrill because they spotted Darth Vader somewhere. But if Darth Vader's on planet and you're working for the Imperials, pretty soon you're going to be asking questions about, why are we dealing with this major threat when, you know, Vades is standing 5 feet over there? Why isn't he over here smashing the cock out of this Jedi? Right. Like, surely he knows he's here. Like, and it takes it can be used well as your characters are now important. They have earned the attention of X. X gives a great reason for why they can't deal with an issue, but they've, you know, made themselves known, and it's a good marker if they've sort of crossed the threshold in terms of power level and notoriety and things like that. And that sort of thing I'm all for. Go nuts. But if you're starting to tack on members to parties and things like that,
don't save people with them either.
Yeah, saving's a bit like, maybe the random save I'd probably steer clear of. But, you know, if they've done a favour for them or something in the past, as long as your players don't expect that to happen, it's fine. And it's made clear, you know, there's a good reason for the person to be there to be able to save them. You can Like they were in it. Like even that's probably a bit depending on the power level of the thing and what's going on that needed to be saved from. Like a random shot in combat, probably not a great time.
Yeah.
But your players have managed to accidentally get themselves surrounded on the top of a mountain by a whole bunch of hobgoblins or something, and they get a pickup from some adult bronze dragon that they did a favour for a couple of sessions back, but they didn't even knew about the issue. But he was flying by, or he'd seen all the torches going up the mountain chasing them or something, decided to go check it out because he was curious. Yeah, that sort of thing, fine. But if they're just coming out of nowhere, it feels a bit like arsehole.
More than like, I'd probably say like once a campaign, maybe
you
get away with it.
Oh, not every time they get into trouble, definitely not, because then
like,
it becomes that expected. And I think when it's unexpected, it's good.
Mm-hmm.
Unexpected and tied in, it can be good. Mm-hmm. If it's just happening at random intervals and there's no real coherent thing, and you're like, why is this person here?
You don't want the established NPCs or the established characters, even if they're your custom characters, to steal the party's thunder, because there is nothing shittier than having someone else come and finish your blow for you. Like how many times in World of Warcraft, for example, does you're standing there and you get someone to 10% health, and then Malfurion shows up and kills him, and he's like, I killed you, and you're like, I did 90% of the work and you gave me none of the credit?
Yeah.
It's like, there's nothing worse than that. It's such crappy, lazy storytelling at a table. I mean, in games like WoW, they can get away with it because, they kind of have to. But when you're sitting at a table, there's nothing worse than having someone steal your thunder or save you when you know you should die.
Yeah.
And especially if you know that they're nowhere nearby.
Yeah, that makes it even worse. I suppose that's worth talking about, that idea of they're nowhere nearby. The idea that particularly if you're using like established character, like an established world from some other, either it's a source book for the game that you're running, or it's a big franchise, like going back to Star Wars as an example. If you put down something that's like a general date, and you're putting yourself on the far side of the galaxy or something like that, and then all of a sudden random famous NPC X shows up, guarantee someone at the table is going to know straight off the bat that that fucker's not here.
Yeah.
So it feels and if you load onto that they rocked up and randomly saved you when you should have died, you're like, and I suppose it's worth noting there as well that there's a difference between rocked up and saved you and rocked up or made contact for some other instance. One is very much so an immediate, and sometimes just the communication for effect is good, particularly if it's making clear that they are dealing with some other issue. This is on you guys.
I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to use a big name to contact your party when they're important enough to be like, hey, I'm dealing with this other world-ending shit, and I don't have time to deal with this smaller issue.
X, Y, Z,
but can you go and do it for me? Because I've noticed you in the world, and you're doing a pretty good job.
Yeah. Or and even then, I'd probably route the first instance or two of that through a third party. Like if I was going to be using some sort of big name, even if it's like my own created big name, I would probably route it through someone first.
That's right.
Luke Skywalker doesn't comm you up and go, hey, can you go check out this problem on Dantooine?
Yeah.
It's random rebel commander number 7 contacts you because they've got intelligence from somewhere that says, you guys have popped up on the radar somehow, someone's noticed you along the way.
That's right.
And then maybe 3 or 4 missions down the line, someone goes, oh yeah, I happened to be somewhere nearby and heard the story, or I saw the explosion and saw, this group of people wandering out and then, happened, or I detected the person in the force there, or...
That's right.
And it was sort of, 3 or 4 steps down the line, they go, oh yeah, I just sort of thought that you guys were a bit of a mark because I saw you, beat the snot out of that group of stormtroopers trying to save a kid. And I just went, oh yeah, well, I told the local rebel cell that you're out there and you might be worth, hooking in with.
Yeah.
And then that coming up later, I think is more of a payoff than just randomly out of the bat as well.
Yeah. You definitely don't want... you don't want to cheapen the major characters because the players feel pissed off. Like, I've had it happen in games where the GM's introduced a major player and I've been like, it just sort of sets the wrong tone to me.
Yeah, and I suppose some of the other risk you run with known NPCs and things like that is, well, actually they might not be as known as you thought they were.
Yep.
You're playing something, and fall back on the Luke Skywalker example. You're playing with people now, late teens, early 20s. May have only seen the prequels.
Mm-hmm.
You go, oh, Luke Skywalker or something. They go, oh yeah, I know the name Skywalker.
Yeah. Must be Anakin's son.
Yeah.
Anakin's dad.
Yeah. Something like that could quite easily happen. So, I mean, particularly if you're in a group that isn't like, you don't already know is all in on that sort of source material. So you might lose the impact you're going for as well.
The other one is playing their personality correctly. Like, you're almost certainly going to misstep. And that makes it very hard to sort of get your players. It sort of breaks their immersion a lot if they expect someone to act a certain way and then you play them slightly differently how you expect them to act.
Or worse, you play them like completely at odds to how that person perceives them. Because I suppose it's worth touching on that. Like, in some things it's a little bit more black and white. But in some areas, you're going to have characters, particularly, I'd say, books are more dangerous than TV shows, that are more dangerous than movies. Because movies, you tend to have a lot of stuff consolidated, and you've got a really good, here is the idea of the person. This is, and they've got some like big markers, and they tend to fit more into archetypes as you move into the longer running sort of shows. You're more prone to like variations in the character across that, and more things fill in. And then if you get to books, a lot more of that is, all right, this is what I think the person looks like. This is what I think, and it gets progressively easier to have a divergent idea of exactly what a person's like, what they look like, how they, what their interaction is. Like, the more of your imagination that goes into filling in a backstory, how a backstory appears, or a person's personality, for when you're looking at a character that you like in something, more chance there is that somebody's going to have a different interpretation and it's going to be jarring. So general advice, I suppose, on this front is, if you're going to do it, briefly, with reason, and
not very often.
I suppose it's worth touching on it as well, and I'm not sure how much we touched on. Like, I know we were talking, when we spoke about character creation, we touched on the NPCs and stuff. I'm trying to remember how much we touched on the idea of the GM PC.
Yeah, just don't do it. That's my advice.
Don't do it, but these are the sort of things as well that tend to lay into that sort of thing. If you have your hero from a particular area or a particular character you gel with and think you like, that mindset's going to be there. I would always make sure that if you've got a big name, have an exit plan for them as well. So that they don't just get stuck down in the like, why don't you tag along and can't help us? Trust me, players love picking up randoms to tag along with them, up until the point that random starts bogging down combat or being more important than they are.
I mean, obviously we'll touch on later, but I've got certain things that I've been using recently and playing with recently from watching a podcast, actually, from listening to a podcast, I should say, but ways to have NPCs help the party without having them bog down combat. And there's definitely ways you can do it, but as a general rule,
just easier not to fall into the trap.
That's right. As a general rule, the less people you have in the group in a combat, the quicker the combat and the more smoothly the combat's going to go. So don't bog it down with 25 NPCs. Don't bog it down with 3 NPCs. I wouldn't even bog it down with 1, but definitely don't bog it down with more than 1.
And the only instance in which I would probably go along with having it is if you have an incredibly small party.
If you're running like a group of 2 people, maybe I'd probably put 1 in.
Maybe 1, just to help with the curve, because everything else is sort of graded on the idea that there's going to be more than 2 people.
That's right, and it's hard to balance a party of over 2 people. Like, it's hard to get all the different things that you need in such a small group. But I think once you get to 3, you can sort of start to cover most of the bases. And they might occasionally have to call in a ringer for a specific job. As opposed to a permanent party member. Again, sort of the only time the only other time would be is for the duration after they save somebody, until they get to a reasonable dropping off point. That's right. So the characters, your players probably aren't going to try and recruit Luke Skywalker, But they might try and recruit memorable smuggler number 1.
Yes.
So play into that. Don't try and... The people that they're recruiting probably aren't going to be that much stronger than them because they want to have people that are on their level.
Exactly. Or
they want to have someone who does something for them specifically, like flies their ship.
Yeah. Or, is captain of a vessel that can get them from point A to point B.
Yeah, like, you fly our ship, you build our guns. Like, they're the people they're going to recruit more than the people that are going to come and stop combat and they're going to do nothing.
Yeah.
Because that's not fun to play.
I'll put a caveat in there as well that you might get that if you've got, squishy mage style games or characters that they might try and pick someone up to be a bit of muscle bodyguard.
Yeah.
Or something like that. That's probably the caveat there. But in most cases, you're right there in the sense that it's usually to fill a niche that they have, and if you can make sure that if they're filling a niche, it's one that's not a center stage sort of niche.
That's right. Yeah.
The pilot, as you mentioned, is probably the big one, particularly if it's somewhere where you've got a reasonable prospect of being able to say, yeah, your pilot just sticks with the ship. Mm-hmm. They're there always. If you need them, that you can call them, they'll try and get to you, or something like that, and probably lay something in there depending on the situation, going, hey, it may not necessarily work, they may not get there. Mm-hmm. Give them an if or whatever, throw a dice and then ignore the result. Mm-hmm. Just so that they're thinking that there's random chance to it.
That's right. Or,
pay attention to the result and actually have random chance to it. Either of those options is perfectly valid.
Definitely.
But, the usual shop keep, the usual barm, and the place where they stay, those sort of recurring characters aren't sort of, whilst important, they aren't really what we're too worried about with what we've been discussing at this point. It's the ones that feel either, one, they overshadow them, or two, they
make something too
bog down combat.
Yeah, they make something so trivial that it's pointless.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, moving on. I guess there's two different camps when it comes to world building and campaign building. The two different camps are in terms of campaigns. Obviously, there's going to be some spectrum here, but the two different extremes I would say would be sandbox and railroad.
Yeah.
And you're going to probably fall somewhere in the middle. I try to run my games very sandbox, but I still have stuff that will probably bring me back towards the railroad side in the background. And you're always going to. But I don't want to talk too much about sandbox because it's too big of a topic to talk about in such a small, as part of another topic. But how do you hide the rails? How do you make it so that it's not so, either not obvious that you're railroading the players, or it's it's more hidden. So it's less played back.
I suppose the first one that I usually use the most out of anything is I'll tend to, in systems where it's reasonably supported, I'll have a stack of random, I say random, not necessarily, they could be like designed encounters or something, but something that I can pull out on the fly and reskin and go, so your decision, or conversely, have a specific planned encounter that the players are going to have at some point, and reskin that to fit wherever they actually go. If it's, like an area, as long as it still makes sense with where they go with it.
Yeah.
If they randomly down in the sewers, they're probably checking something out. They're probably not going to encounter a charging Black Knight coming down the middle of the main pipe. But having that sort of thing that's just sort of sitting around out the side, either story important or completely not, just somewhat random. I think the one that immediately jumps to mind is I ran when we were doing our dual run, when we were both running the same game. I had the water elementals when they were trying to cross a broken bridge. Having that in your pocket to just pull out and go, hey, that's there, helps a lot with that on-rail stuff. Like at some point they're going to cross a waterway. You can just pull that out and use it whenever, and it gives you an encounter that you can fit into a thing that you might not otherwise have it play.
That's right.
Or you might have the random thugs or the random, goblin, troop that's attacking a caravan or something. And feel free to reskin on the fly. Oh, doesn't really make sense for those goblins to be there. Oh, they're just a bunch of bandits. And you just call them bandits. You describe them as bandits, and then you just run with the stats that you got there. And people will go, well, that was a little bit weird. They were pretty, unusually weak bandits, or they were
stronger than usual bandits,
depending on what you've reskinned. But
who cares?
If you don't lean too far, like if stuff's got like really obvious sort of power suites or something like that. You just take that out of it.
That's right. Yeah, the bandit didn't use its fifth arm to attack you.
Yeah, exactly. Unless you're in a mutant style world where you can get away with that.
I mean, yeah. But yeah, really obviously jarring things they shouldn't have.
One that jumps to mind is the orcs in 5th edition. I think it might be 4th edition, but there was a point at which that they got like a free a free damage upgrade or a free move as part of charge or something along those lines. Just don't mention it like that. Roll the dice as if they've done it, or go they've charged, and something else has happened. Like unless it's like really descriptively required, just run with what you've got on the sheet, or they'll just go, oh, I wonder how that happened, and all of a sudden, hey, maybe they've got someone hiding in the corner that was casting haste on them that comes up later that nobody ever saw during the combat.
That's right.
They get back to bandit camp and find out that there's like a neutral or evil cleric or wizard or something that's hanging around that's working with them and going, oh, so that's how I'll manage to charge, do this and do that, and like ended up one action out of.
Yeah, it's just sometimes. I mean, they might even choose to investigate that random encounter even more depth now because of that weird thing that happened. Just steer into it and just let it go. Let it run its course. Just start thinking about it. I mean, they're probably not going to get to it by the end of that session anyway, so have a bit of a think about, well, okay, in between that and the next session, okay, I used that creature, it's got this ability, cool. Well, how do I make it so that it makes sense for them to have the ability? Even if it's a potion or a scroll or something that they use before the fight, there's definitely ways you can get around those sorts of things.
So, and I'd say that's probably the number one sort of thing that I've used over the years to get around the idea of any particular session in being on rails. Because having that sort of stack to the side that you can sort of fit in a little bit anywhere, and it takes very little to manipulate. It lets you it makes it look like you're planned for whatever they're doing when you're not necessarily. So it puts that in people's minds, but it also does. It gives you the option to drop stuff in without, particularly if you're someone who prefers to have particularly finely crafted encounters, or you're getting used to a system and you don't want to accidentally overspend on some random thing that people do. And you can pull that out and go, oh, this should be roughly where they are.
Yeah.
And it lets you do that sort of thing and not be going, and them not sitting there. Like, he's talking an awful lot about this warehouse. Why are we going to this warehouse? He's making, like, every decision we make seems to be funneling us towards this warehouse. The other one is like don't tie down your like if you're in a dungeon area, feel free to go, you have a left or a right hand turn.
That's right. Well, that's the way that I hide the rails. You have a left or a right hand turn, and realistically in my mind it doesn't matter what way you go, because the way you go is going to have the room that I want to be there. But the players think they have the choice, and if they go back, I'll put something there. It'll be something random, and it'll probably be something that I'll pull from somewhere else in the dungeon to be there. But yeah, if they've got a choice and there's left or right, in my mind it doesn't matter what you choose, because at the end of the day this is what's happening.
Yeah.
And that's what I do. I have probably 3 or 4 scenes for a session planned out that are definitely going to happen at some point in that session. But it just sort of depends where I can slot it in believably.
And the rest is just riff it.
That's right. And the rest of it I just ad-lib. Because chances are the things that are going to be important are those 3 scenes, and it's just sort of when I can fit them in, they'll go in. And if I can't fit them in, I'll pull them aside and I'll put them into a separate stack like you said. And I have a stack of scenes sitting next to me where I'm like, cool, you guys are in a port city. Thieves show up, You guys are in the jungle. There's this creepy tower that you get to go and explore now. Yeah. And they're just things that I have in my mind that it's then like, okay, cool. Well, now they're coming to this point. I can use that again. And
then it gives you a touchstone as a GM as well. Is probably the big thing. Like you said with they might look into why this person seemed to have certain abilities that they wouldn't normally have, or it was a little bit weird that they acted in a particular way because they had access to what. Similarly with your with locations and stuff, feel free to have the stack of locations and not encounters as well, hanging around. Like, they might go wandering down the street and they're like, oh yeah, such and such runs into a warehouse. Chances are, if maybe not when starting out, but if you've been running for a while, chances are you've run people through a warehouse at some point.
That's right.
Like, you might not have it right on hand, but feel free to draw on what you've used for it before and go, all right, I had a whole bunch of bandits in here. That really doesn't make sense at the moment because of the type of world we're in. But, hey, it's now a drug lab. Like, just quick reskin.
That's right, and it's not too much effort, and it's just, to hide the rails, this is the plot, this is what's happening, and this is what the information I need to give you guys. Just changing how the information comes depending on their actions, but they're still getting the same information.
Yeah.
It's just...
I think really what we're touching on here is you're creating the illusion of choice. Certain things are definitely going to happen, and you're going to react ad lib on stuff too. So it's not like you're entirely putting people on rails, but as long as they've got that feeling of agency and you don't lock yourself into this is definitely going to happen. Like if it makes a reasonable amount of sense, throw stuff in. I'd say that's probably the easiest way to, if you've got something on rails there, or using an investigatory example as opposed to a logistical one in terms of where people go. Like if they draw a wrong conclusion and take them off somewhere, just throw in a random piece of information to that place they're going.
That's right. That'll get them back to where you want them to go,
or hell, make it the place that they end up going. They can get the exact same information they'd have got if they'd gone somewhere else. Like the reason they got there isn't necessarily important. Like as long as the two things, aren't like jarringly different.
Yeah.
Like if the end result is they need to get to warehouse X in the center of town, and some player randomly decides that based off 3 pieces of information you've already found at 3 different locations, this is in the middle of a pentagram because I've got 3 points. And it's just going to be a case of find these 2. Just throw your other 2 random locations there.
That's right, yeah.
Like it makes the players feel like they're involved. It makes them feel like they've got made it, had an impact on the world based on their decision. They have, in the sense that you've picked up on their decision as opposed to they necessarily figured it out. Everyone gets a nice bit of a bump out of it. Goes, you beaut, I'm on this. And sometimes it's better than what you had planned.
That's right, yeah.
Like they go, the one that jumps out to mind is 40k all the time. Like if you get like a random trail of things start happening in a city, guaranteed someone's going to figure out in inverted commas that it is the symbol of some sort of cult or something, and there has to be something there. Guaranteed. Even if there is nothing to do with it, they'll have it's some sort of cult and it's here.
That's right.
Because that's what they're primed to be looking for in that style of game. Or you'll have somebody who's insane like me at times and goes, hey, what's the sewer layout for this city? And you just go, oh yeah, and by the way, there's a couple of entrances here, and you just at the time you go, and just happen to decide, we'll put one next to each of the places that they found stuff. Like it was never originally there from the start point,
That's
but
right.
It's something to lead them to another clue or something like that they may not have intended, but it could be the same location. It's just like, I'll put a sewer right there, and now they go, the sewers are really important when they may or may not have been in the past, but it still gets them to where they need to go, and no one's the wiser.
So a big one for me is if you're going to have a game where you don't want them to feel like they're boxed in and there's only one solution, make sure you always have a few solutions to every problem.
Definitely.
I usually land on the rule of 3. So there should always be 3 ways to solve something. 3 pieces of key evidence that give you like the aha moment. Yeah. And they probably won't find all 3. They'll probably only find 1, and they'll have the aha moment, and
then they'll go and not bother looking for the other 3.
That's right.
I'd also sort of tack onto that. One of those 3 has to not be locked behind a skill roll or a specific special action. Yeah. It's something that just by being there, they're going to get access to. They may make a wrong interpretation of it and take them on a wrong wild goose chase, but just by getting to that point, they should get something that advances the story, either using an investigation as an example. It can be a correct clue, it can be a red herring or something, but it's something that drives them to another location or to another plot point.
You can't let your game stagnate behind skill rolls.
Yeah.
You've really got to have something that they can just get.
Yeah. And feel free, like if you're going to put it behind a skill roll, be conscious of the fact that just because they failed a skill roll doesn't mean they're locked out of the thing. It means something might have gone wrong. Or, for instance, if they're trying to get into a room that's got a clue in it or something, and they botch the roll, you can get in there and you can get the clue, but you triggered an alarm of some description. rather than, oh yeah, the door doesn't open, you can't get in there, and yeah, we're all sort of sitting here with no idea where to go from here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good one, and it's funny how often you sort of, you make a plan and then the players don't quite succeed, and you're like, oh shit, how am I going to get them that information? And it's just, if you just had to fall back onto the point that you just made, where failing isn't always failing. Sometimes it's succeeding with a complication. It's an interesting point, and it's something that's Warhammer Fantasy. I sort of read the rules recently again, and their successors have that inbuilt. So if you succeed, if you just succeed, then there is a complication, and if you just fail, there's
you get it, but it's a big complication.
You get something, but it's a big complication. So it's like, yeah, it's a very interesting concept, and it's not something you sort of traditionally would put in something. Like, you either get to or you don't.
I'll attribute that one to the Edge of the Empire stuff for the Star Wars game by Fantasy Flight, where the dice roll mechanics specifically could result in, I think it's success, and you could end up with like triumph or despair, or success, failure, triumph, despair. And the idea of it was you could succeed and something goes wrong with a despair. So yeah, you get the thing, but this goes wrong, and that was built into the die roll mechanic. And I've just gone, why not just use that everywhere? And expand that out to just be, success or failure determines something happens, but use some judgment to be able to go.
Yeah, like if it's absolutely 100% dead critical that they get this piece of evidence, they interact with this thingamabob, then maybe don't lock it behind a fail, and if they fail, something goes wrong, but they get through.
Something goes wrong, and that something goes wrong could be anything. Like it could be anything from they see it and someone grabs it first and makes a run for it, or it's damaged, so you can't get everything that you want straight off it. But there's the point of, oh hey, can we find someone who can fix this so we can retrieve the rest of the data, or
the guards come is a very basic one.
The guards come, so you can still grab the stuff. It's like now getting out's a bit more complicated. So I think that's probably between that and having 2 or 3 options for progressing the story at a decision point. Like it might not be so much a decision point as you get 1 or 2 or 3 of these things point, but decision points are sort of like a good process flow way of thinking about it. Is that you should have multiple outflows, and at least one of them just needs to happen. Yeah.
And ideally, nothing terminates quickly.
Oh, no. And anything like, if you're doing investigations, your red herring should eventually give information as to why. Like, if it's a red herring and it's pointing at somebody else, if it looks like it's something that was probably a deliberate red herring, the person who's being set up in this scenario should have a rough idea of the people who don't like them and might be wanting to set them up.
Yeah, that's right.
To sort of direct it back, or give a couple of options for more things to look into.
That's right.
Rather than just get to the end and go, it's obviously not this guy. All right, well, now we backtrack.
That's right.
And hope we find something.
So moving on from that, how do we incorporate our players into our world building, into our world, into everything? How do you make your players not only interested, but also that they matter? Their characters matter. Their actions matter. How do you do that?
Really, I suppose the thing is, let them impact the world. It's a little unspecific and broadly spoken, but if they're doing stuff that's heroic or villainous, either option, they're going to be impacting upon the area in which they're in, whether that area be the little village that they happen to start in, or the country they're in, or the planet that they've arrived at. A tangible change as a result makes them, it should be there. One is just a good case of they've made an impact because they've done this, and it makes sense that things have changed. But it also gives players the idea that they matter in the world, and it doesn't need to be immediate.
No.
Like if they solve a problem, even if it's an accidental problem, like they find out it's a problem and they're up there and they've never actually seen the people who it's affecting, and they come back, 6 months later or something and visit a village, say they fix a problem with some water elementals upstream, and they were dealing with a problem for, you know, like a factory or something that was, you know, a little bit further down, or the water elementals had been annoying. And they've sort of done that problem, and the factory's back to working, and it feels sort of, you know, yeah, they've made an impact there. And then, you know, 3-6 months later, they go somewhere further down the river. They find out that there's a village down there. And they come across a village, and the village is celebrating because they've just had their best harvest in years because there's been plenty of water, and they can't figure out why, but they're just happy.
Yeah.
Like, having stuff like that in there where there's ripple effects, one, it makes the world feel alive, and two, it lets them think that, oh, stuff we're doing matters.
Yeah.
And like the immediate draw when you start doing that is like first order effects of, we've done this and we get immediate reward for it. When sometimes a few of the longer lasting things that come up a little bit later, particularly if it's the further away it is from the initial event.
Yeah, that's right.
Gives that sense of, you know, well, we're having a real impact on the world, no matter how big, small, or distance. And one that probably means a little bit more to you, just because you have tended to run these games more than I have, is, you know, is like, you know, planetary scale stuff. Like, it can be easy to feel as a player like you haven't had an impact. Yeah. And there's been plenty of times that I've played in spacefaring games and I'm going, I'm like, I really don't feel anything for having done this. Like, I know it matters for me, and I've gotten benefits out of it, but I don't think of it. But, you know, I suppose, like little things that jump to mind that you've inserted into games for us is things like, all right, we're back at Port Wander and Rogue Trader, and we've now got a space, or to immediately steer away from that sci-fi side of things and warring fantasy. Fuck, these guys are getting a bit big for their britches. Here, have some cash. Go set up a city over there. You know, like way over there.
Yeah, you guys are getting a bit too popular and a bit too big. How about you go over there and deal with this massive... How about you go over there and build a city that we've been trying to reclaim in this area?
Yeah, go forth. Go back to the surface.
Yeah, we love you. And yeah, go back to the surface. You're getting too big for you. You guys are really powerful. Go to the surface and see what's going on up there nowadays.
Yeah, and it's... Yeah, having those sort of... Like, they might not seem like it initially when you do it, but players will eventually pick up on things like... Stuff's changed in this space. Tails jumps to mind as well when you ran that using Pathfinder. Was that Tails or was that...
Tails was Pathfinder, yeah.
Yeah, and, you know, you start injecting cash into a town. And, you know, well, business starts moving. Like, you come back a little while later, oh, there's more stuff here. Oh, they've heard that it's safe. They've heard that there's a port here that they can trade at. You know, having those sort of things build up as well in the background. One, it helps you keep pace with your characters in terms of their needs. From a particularly in systems where there's a quite a lockstep, you know, power level / character level / equipment level balance.
Yeah,
and having that sort of, the characters are impacting these places, becoming safer or richer or some combination thereof, and that's causing ripple effects out of, well, traders now pass through this town because they know that the roads along here are safer. And
yeah, definitely, that's definitely something you can work on. The so one that I think is worthwhile mentioning is if the players want and have some kind of interest in the world and they take part in the world's creation in some way, which we can talk about as another point in a minute. But if the players, even if it's like your world, for example, like if I came to you and you made your world and you're like, well, you know, you've listed these races, but I want to play a pixie. And I'm like, and this is what I think the pixie's background should be, and this is what I think their history should be, and this is how they interact. Being able to just be like, yes, okay, you can do that.
Yep, sure, why not? Or, yeah, sure, but can we tweak this a little bit?
Yeah.
Or, yeah, there's actually something that was planned to be there, but they can be from over here. Like, it doesn't need to necessarily be an unqualified yes.
So, yeah, well, like, you let your players impact the world at the writing stage as well if they are interested in it. Like, it's...
Like, if your character wants to say, oh, part of my background was he was a part of a battle against whatever, or something like that. Oh, yeah, well, there was now a battle against whatever.
That's right, yeah. Like, let them have that background. Like, there was a village out here that was destroyed, and I'm from there, and my family's been either.
Hopefully they're not a fully killed off family lone wolf style character for the 15th time over. But
it's funny, like you think back to our first characters. My character was definitely a lone wolf family was killed by werewolves character. I don't think I've ever written that again intentionally, but I don't know. Everyone sort of has one. It always happens. You inevitably your table's going to have one, or it's going to.
Someone's
going to write it.
And depending on what GMs people have had, that can tend to increase.
Yes.
Because on this sort of note, tying in like your characters' backstories and things into the world, part of that is, well, the character has a family.
Mm-hmm.
Is that free game? Like, will the villain look into that sort of thing? And depending on what your big bad, or whether if you've got an intelligent, well thought out, motivated bad guy, if he can find out about this, like, is there a reason why he wouldn't go across that family? And the thing that's important is for it not to feel like an arsehole if you do it, and it shouldn't feel like you're punishing your characters for having a backstory.
And it shouldn't happen often enough that they start to get scared about having having connections that aren't god tiered.
Yeah, so maybe not all of the characters' families are always, every time you run, something goes wrong with regards to them.
Yeah.
Or something.
It's perfectly reasonable. I remember I ran a D&D game for a while where one of the characters had he was like the only character that actually had a wife, and I always just, every single time they went back to the city, like back to the major city in the area, he'd go and visit his wife, and he'd like drop some money on his family, and he'd always be bringing back toys and stuff that he'd sort of discovered, and it was just sort of nice and interesting, and sort of at another level. It wasn't ever talked about at any like length or anything, like it was never a problem, but it started to be when they came back that she'd have a feast for the party and things like that, and it was just, it was just something that sort of tied to her that made her feel like she was there, but at the same time, I didn't have the big bad guy show up and stood her throat in front of the party and be like,
so tie them in, I think, that's really touching. Tie them in a way that's, one, not a punishment to the player, two, makes sense.
That's right.
And three, if it's reasonable in the scheme of everything that NPC would get targeted or something, don't shy away from it just because it's a character, but don't put it in the firing line just because it's a character.
That's right, you want to walk the line. You want to make sure that, if they get targeted for a reason, and it needs to be clear.
Yeah.
Maybe not right away, but it'll be clear eventually. And it's also, if the big bad guy decides it's going to destroy the town that the parties have been hanging out in a lot, and that means that some of their family ends up in the line of fire, that's a fair enough reason. Yeah. But the first
maybe not just random assassins come and kill them because they killed a couple of goblins that the guy was using.
That's right. Other good ones, like, probably sort of all in the same sort of vein. It's good as a player if you're going to write a backstory that's meaningful. So in terms of what I mean by meaningful, I mean like it has some kind of hooks that the GM can then expand on. So you have a friend or a brother or a sister or a family, you have a town that you like, you have a thing that you like, an item that you like, and things that they can expand on and use. Maybe the item that you like is actually a relic, and you eventually discover its power, or you discover the item, its history, and that sort of has some kind of meaning to your character.
This has been passed down from my father from my grandfather, from my great grandfather. I've got no idea why the hell they're handing this thing down. It's just a family heirloom.
Yeah, and in all intents and purposes, it's a shit sword that everyone's always just used. And then eventually you're like, all right. And then, eventually you get to a certain level and the GM's like, okay, well, instead of giving you another sword, we'll make that one magical.
Yeah. You start unlocking latent abilities. Yeah. You've used it enough now that stuff's starting to feel a little bit weird. Like, you've used swords before and you've sort of been using this one, and you've been using it so long, but you got stuck using a different sword, and it doesn't feel right, and you pull your other one back out and you go, oh, yeah. Well, so little things like that in the lead up.
That's right, yeah.
Particularly to go into a system-specific sort of example, Pathfinder with its mythic rules. There's some legendary weapon stuff in there where you can like sort of grow your weapon with you as you go, and things like that. Having that sort of thing, particularly if someone's got an heirloom weapon, like by bringing some of that in, even if you're not running a mythic game, maybe going, all right, well, having the conversation with the player, like, well, you've obviously decided that this weapon is important to you for some reason. It's come in as an heirloom, or it's something that you've built your character around. The thing I jumped to is that samurai I played with its, katana that was just like, yep, this is my katana, this is my thing, it came from this thing, and I completely forgot that between character building and us actually starting, it turned out that we were inside a video game, so it made absolutely no sense whatsoever that character would be that attached to that digital katana. It was just something that, part of his thing that got put into the character before, some other piece of pertinent information came up and got stuck in my mind. But it would have been completely reasonable from that point going forward, if we'd been in sort of a normal game, to have gone, all right, well, maybe instead of getting magical, finding magical weapons or something like that, we just tag on.
Yeah, that's right.
Like an heirloom weapon quality for the player. And, I'd have a bit of the conversation with them about it maybe after you've started seeding the chances that there could be something there. Say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Be aware this will result in maybe you may not find other items and stuff like that you would have if you weren't getting this benefit here to keep you in sort of check with everyone else.
Like, don't feel like you get left behind because you're not picking up the battle axe of dead bitches, but your sword is your family sword, and it's starting to unlock this potential, this ability. It's and like other hooks, you don't want to. Their best friend, instead of killing their best friend, maybe he sees something and comes and contacts his friend. He's like, I know you're an adventurer. We've been friends for so long.
Can you come back and check this weird shit out?
Like, something's happening and I don't understand. It's beyond me.
Or can you come back? The pastor is acting really weird. Like, we don't know what's going on. He keeps making these weird proclamations and it doesn't make any sense. We know you're a cleric or a paladin. Can you come check this dude out for us?
That's right, you're playing like a modern setting and your girlfriend calls you up on their mobile and like, oh man, I need you to come back home because shit's going down and it's like lots of noises and in the neighbourhood, I don't know what's going on, and
all the dogs have been going for hours.
It's like, maybe someone just calls you for comfort, but using those hooks in their backstory makes them feel like the world that they've written for their character, as well as the world that you've written, are now intertwined as opposed to two separate things.
I suppose on that front as well, people that know your family members or historical organisations or things like that, getting in contact as well. Like, if you go somewhere and your backstory is that your family was minor nobility, and it really doesn't actually confer any sort of mechanical benefit to you in a game sense. Like, occasionally, if you go somewhere and your GM knows that, they'll wind in something. Someone will recognise your surname. They might not recognise you, but they'll recognise your surname if you're using it. Or they might go, why are you familiar to me? It's like you've met this guy previously at some like social gathering or something that you were forced to attend with your parents. Or, little things like that, which may not necessarily be game important in terms of major plot threads or anything, or could go either way, or like fundamentally important. But not everything has to be a first degree connection.
No, that's right.
And in some cases, it's probably safer to go with a second or third degree connection to start with if you're in sort of like a wildly dispersed campaign in terms of location or whatever. Like if you're in your local town, your girlfriend, your mother, your sister, your brother, your cousin, whatever, calling up and going, hey mate, can you come check this out for me? Like, can you come back to the farm? We've had some problems, like some of the, like sheep are disappearing and all we're finding is like weird scrape marks in the ground, or come have a look if you happen to be. Doubly so if there's any sort of, like, if your character writes home to your parents and stuff and things like that, I would increase the chances of that sort of thing happening as well. Because if you're writing back and saying, oh, here's the stories and things, and something comes out, even if it's not like, oh, we know you're a fighter, you keep mentioning that you're hanging around with a guy who sounds like he knows a bit about the wilderness. Can you ask him about this? And then you guys go, have a bit of a chat. The ranger that's in the party makes a knowledge roll based off what you're describing. And all of a sudden they're like, mate, we need to go back and visit your parents because this is actually a problem. Like they're asking you and it's a problem for them because it's causing a downside, but this is actually a problem. Or
and that's right. You can make it become like a bit of a character arc. Like if you have, I don't know, this is interesting, and it's not something that I've really done myself, but it's something I've played before, having character arcs in a campaign, like, this section is about going to this character's hometown. Involving everyone is definitely important when you're doing that, but it's cool to have that as a backstory, as a way of expanding on your character's backstories. We're going to go and deal with this character's hometown, or, we're going to go and look into that magic weapon, and we're going to go and, go to this tomb and see if we can find out more information about it, and things like that. But if you're going to do that and go that route, which is definitely a viable way to go, and I think it's an interesting way to go, and it's something I would like to explore, you need to make sure that everyone is included and has meaningful impact, because otherwise they start to feel very bored.
Yes. In some cases, it's not going to be easy to tie the specific reason to them, but once they're something that makes them relevant when they're there, even if it's not,
even if it's just falling back on their usual skills, just not taking them out of the action.
Yeah, they've come back to check this thing out because it's going to be important for a Y character. But to get that answer, they need Z character to be able to do something.
Yeah.
Like they need the paladin, even though you grew up here your whole life. The church still doesn't want to talk to you, but you rock up with your paladin mate, who goes, "Hey, what can you tell us?"
That's right.
I suppose from to tag back into world building a little bit at this point, one of the things that's important to have set in mind, speaking of paladins, it reminded me of it, but this expands out to things like cavaliers and nobles and the like, is what authority do character classes convey, if anything, is a really important thing to have set in your mind. And if it's a case of they need to have the character class and be in an organisation that exists in your world to gain benefits of things, have a clear idea of, one, whether you would let somebody at character creation be a member of that off the bat, and give them that option. They might tell you, no, look, I'm not interested, and go. But if they get to a point they are anticipating that they're playing or using using the paladin as the example, because it's the easiest one that jumps to mind, is the case of, like, does this guy actually have the right to be going around judging people and going, oh yeah, you're an evil mother, you're evil, I'm going to smite you down here and now? Like, what happens is he just determines, like, some random dude who's never done anything in town is evil. Like, he might be right, but does he actually have the authority to do it?
Yeah, that's the other thing.
And like, how does the local cops, for lack of a better way of putting it, deal with like that? Like, you guys go off and they fight, their way through the dungeon and fight a big bad sitting at the bottom of it, drag his ass back in chains to the local town, and the local town goes, "Oh, shut on then. You haven't done anything to us." Like, "Oh, but you guys, you've now been keeping some random dude prisoner." Yeah. Why? And then they say, "Oh, he was doing this." I'm like, "Okay, can you prove it?"
Yeah, that's right.
Like, having that sort of, you run, parties quite often can run the risk of going, "Hey, we're the heroes, therefore we can do anything we want." And in some games that's fine. Like, if you're playing a bit of a hack and slash, let's go have some fun, beer and pretzels, probably not an issue. If you're playing anything that's got a little bit more political depth or living world style action to it, they're questions that you may not immediately jump out, but they're going to become important. Like, if they get in a bar fight and decide to pull a dagger or something, what's the ramification for that?
Yeah. Also, I think the other ones, like, you talk about paladins, like, what about like wizards? Like, what's the respect like for magic in the world? Do people like it? Do people hate it? Are people scared of it?
Is it a mix thereof?
Yeah, it's definitely something you should definitely think about and talk about as the world's going on, and have some interaction, interplay.
Yeah, have something that shows it to the players before it happens to them. The other one, touching on, I suppose, religion is probably the big one, whether it be clerics, paladins, or anything that draws power from religion, is if it's something that feels like it's, like, what's the source of the divine power is the question. And it's an important one for your world, because it's going to determine how these power structures survive.
Mhm.
If you have an organized church which has a hierarchy, has priests and prelates, and an effective pope or things like that, how does that interact with one day someone can wake up with the power of Iomade coursing through them, and that power disappears when they displease her, but they've still got their power? Like, if they rock up in a random town, is it a situation where I serve this church, the god in her church, and if the church tells me to do something, I do it? Or is it, can they rock up and they come to this random priest out in the middle of nowhere, and they go, no, this is how things work to the priest? Yeah. Like, or I'm going to do this, or I'm in town for XYZ, or I'm going to, I suppose the broader one taking it outside of religion is organisational sort of ones. Like, if you're going to let a player have a backstory where they were a soldier for an army, one, are they still in the army? And if they are, does that rank have privileges? Like, if you're willing to let them play a sergeant in an army that's on detached service to do, to work in a small group, and the one that jumps to mind is Iron Kingdoms, where they've got their I'm trying to remember what it's called. It's effectively like an asymmetrical response team, and it's a bit of a mismatch of everything. It's it's the random group name that they. Yeah, pretty much. Like, well, they're there and they're still working for it, so they're still a sergeant. Like, if they're in a war zone, like, there is no reason why they shouldn't be able to just, like, if they come across a bunch of random privates hanging around somewhere, like, the player is probably going to make the assumption that, hey, you lot do what I say, and it should be semi-reasonable for them to do so, or you need a good reason as to why.
Yeah, that's right.
It's not. Similarly, if they've been hired on to do certain jobs for law enforcement, does law enforcement then confer them something to say that, yeah, you guys actually work for us and you're doing something? Like, the amount of times, like, the watch might hire someone to go and deal with, the goblins outside of town. Like, is it just like, it's all on us, we go out there and, it's on the watch? Or, and if, like, can we go in and go interrogate someone about what they've seen? Like, can we force them to talk to us? Yeah. Having those sort of ideas in your head, I try wherever you can to to give the players some sort of example as to this happening. Yeah. Maybe not for every instance of that, but if you can draw, like, a general theme going through it that, you guys are, you may be heroes, you may be everything, but the world has bureaucratic structures around you. Like, for instance, if you've made it clear that at some point that, there's been an issue where you've rubbed up against the authorities, and the authorities are like, you guys, you're strong, but you don't actually have any authority, and they make that clear. I think that's enough for it applying to everyone across the party, unless shown otherwise going forward. I don't think you need to go to each person specifically and go, no, this is the bounds of your authority. This is the bounds of your authority, unless they have, something specific that they're playing. That, again, like, are they an officer in a military? Are they a noble? What does that entitle them to? Are they they're the captain of your starship? Does that mean they can order other players around in character? And how does that function at the table? All of that sort of background stuff that might not seem, you may not jump to mind, but it'll seem important when you get there. And all of a sudden, if people are on different wavelengths, it's going to cause some friction. And most of the time, you can have a bit of a discussion about it. Go, okay, so hey, this is how it's going to work. But some of the bigger ticket items, like are divine magic casters, like, embraced by their religions? Are they seen as dangerous threats to the power structure because they have a reasonable claim to be able to make that I speak for God? And the reason I know that I speak for God is He's still giving me power, whereas you're standing there behind a pulpit just telling people, and you can't show any reason for it. Yeah. And what lengths would those structures go to disabuse themselves of that potential problem person if they perceive them as a threat to their own authority?
Yeah, for sure. So, so we talked about, like, character backstories and how to incorporate them. What if players don't have a backstory? You still want to incorporate them, and you still want them to have those arcs. Like, if everyone else at the table has that backstory, and for example, like, a new player doesn't, you still want them to have that chance. It's a shine. I think
I'd actually be a little bit surprised if I saw a new player come in with a backstory unprompted. They might have like a general idea of the sort of character and that they want to be this, but not like fleshed out to the extent that you would need as a GM to sort of grab hooks from. So if they did, all well and good or something, but for a new player in particular, or someone who just is sitting down with a new group and isn't sure how they play yet and doesn't want to wants to get a bit of a feel for the group or the game or the world, I'd suggest doing that. Give them the chance to have a bit of a play around, and for the first couple of sessions, you can make mention of stuff that's happened in your history or something as you feel it's appropriate, and then once you've done that, you've built up a bit of an idea about your character's backstory and your head based off those interactions and things. As long as you're not going over the top with it, or during those sessions.
It's not like every club or something.
Yeah, but if it makes sense to you, like if they're playing a fighter and they go, oh yeah, I used to be involved in pit fights down in this area, or they're a rogue and they're like, this is the streets that I used to run on or something in the town, and they come up with that in the middle of the game. Roll with it. And then maybe after a couple of sessions, go, all right, so can you nail some things down for me that are the case? Similar to personality as well, as distinct from backstory.
That made things difficult to read.
So just take a moment to, on religion, what about things there? How does non-religious class character interact with
that? Wont has to have a good fleshed out amount of reading for what I really see. Anything else that does?
So they might be getting a little garbled there with how it's displaying for us, but
in regards to how does the question seems to be how does like a non-religious character interact with religion? So here we go. I can read here. On religion, what about things like how does the non-religious class character interact with that? Wont tends to have good fleshed out reading for it, but I haven't really seen anything else that does. So like,
so you're just your layperson.
Yeah, how does your layperson interact with religion?
From a player character's perspective, it's probably a good question to ask, particularly if you've got a religious world. But doubly so if you've got a world in which the gods are quite evidently active.
Yeah.
If it's if you're playing like real world equivalent, then there's no direct evidence that there is a god interacting with the world, particularly at a personal level. Feel free to believe what you want. There's a good question. There's a big
difference between there's a man in the sky given blessing me, then there's the man in the sky that's blessing me and I believe that and I have faith in that, to there's the god right there sitting in that chair
waving at me. And similarly, just because they're not a cleric or a paladin or something, they're gods. And who they worship is going to be important. That being part of their backstory, if their religion, their centre focus, whether it be a pantheon or a single god or a particular sect, I'd definitely be willing to tie that into it. Occasionally, there might not be a specific call on them, which you would expect to see with maybe if a paladin was riding through town and a church comes up and goes, You are a church.
I'm just thinking too, from the example, I think what Baladar is trying to say, what if it's not so much as it may not be what he's trying to say, but it's a point that I want to bring up anyway. But what if it's not so much as a paladin as the member of the church, but say like a wizard that is it happens to be a member of the church still? Is that an option that you would include in your world? I think I would.
Yeah.
You can be a wizard that's a member of the church of...
and that's sort of where I was trying to go with that. So it's a case of there might be general pronouncements, or they might not. If you're an active member and you're in the church, and they might come to you and say, "Hey, can you help us out?" That's an interesting interplay because they may not have the what we would normally think of as authority to tell you to do something. But if you're a member of that church and they come and say, "Hey, we, the church of whatever, we need some help," that's probably going to play on a character on a player and a character if they've made that part of their character. If the part of their character is that they are ascribed to a particular religion, then one, it should be fair game for them to be approached about that
Mhm.
from their religion of choice, to say, hey, we need some help. And maybe that the religion would expect that help at a discount rate. Whether or not the player gives it is up to them, but it would be reasonable for them to assume it. And the degree to which their level of fervour is in terms of their religious.
It's funny because we touched on gods before, and we touched on, like, you know, you've got to decide if you're building a world from the ground up, for example, you've got to build the gods as well. You've also got to think about how the peasant farmer worships those gods. What does the peasant farmer actually do to pay homage to that god? How does he worship, you know, the god of the harvest? What does he do? Does he have to sacrifice like 10% of his harvest every time, and, you know, that makes the next harvest blessed? Or, you know,
is it sacrifice the best goat?
Yeah, like, you know, they're things that the normal person in the town has to do.
Yeah.
And then they things, you know, maybe you don't specifically say that, or say, you know, if you worship this god, this is what his tenets are. But maybe showing that every now and then, like, you know, you go to a farm and they're doing the ritual or something like that.
Or maybe they make some sign at the mention of the god of undeath, or, you know, that's going on in the area that they're in. I'd definitely be tying some sort of stuff in there. Like, when you think about it, like using a D&D world as a baseline example, there's a lot of stuff out there that people are going to be superstitious about. And where there's superstition, you're going to find religion. Either sanctioned religion, in that this is how you deal with the problem, you make these appropriate offerings or tasks or prayers or whatever, and this will keep you safe. Or just superstition stuff, like the old, you know, throwing salt over the shoulder thing, like wrapping superstition in there as well, whether it be as part of the religion of a religion or not. You know, it's little things like that that do make the world feel alive. And sometimes your characters might pick it up. Like, I think there's one. I think the one that immediately jumps to mind, and it's interesting that Bala touched on Warhammer, because I think that's where I picked it up from. But almost always when playing games, unless I'm, you know, playing a particular jackass style of character, like we go through a church, or like if there's some sort of like offering bowl at the front, or like, you know, wishing well fountain or something like that, I'll throw a couple of copper in it.
That's
like
right.
There's no earthly reason why it's come up, but somewhere along the line I picked that up as, you know, hey, that's the thing. You know, they have a charity box or something, I'll drop a couple of coins in there.
And conversely, like, I've never in a game as a character where there's organised religion or definite presence of gods, I've never felt the need to pilfer like a church's. Like, even if I'm raiding like a temple to an evil god, I won't take from their collection plates, and I won't take from their reliquaries, because it's like, you know, if you live in this world and you interact with those beings, and people that follow those beings, then you would know that touching things that have been donated or gifted or sacrificed to a god would definitely bring some kind of bad juju on your head.
Yeah. And it's entirely reasonable as well for the non-initiated to have thoughts of themselves that they do. Like, you might go into a local village that throws coins off the bridge every time they cross it. And the idea is that they're paying homage to a god of nature in their particular way, because they rely on that river to flow and flood regularly to drop silt for planted crops in. And it's just randomly specific to that location. I mean, it might be similar to other things in different places, like if the god's got a particular attraction to water, you know, you might tie to that to a bridge instead of what might everywhere else be that, you know, like Wishing Well Fountain or something like that in most other cities, but in this case it's a bridge. And putting local spins on things, particularly, I mean, as you in the historical settings more so than futuristic ones, anytime that there's anything that there's sort of a delay, like a reasonable delay in terms of communication between locations, and the idea that there's less codified stuff. So, you know, if it's, you know, medieval style fantasy, probably go with the idea that the only person who really knows a lot about the religion in the town is probably the priest. If they've got one, they might otherwise have a shrine, and the priest comes through priest comes through town once every month or something and does a mass. But apart from that, it's all sort of, kind of vaguely what we remember about the religion. And,
it's what Grandma told me.
It's what Grandma told you. Yeah, those sort of slants on it. Also, depending on it, be more than willing to, in the event that there's, you know, sort of neighbouring towns, or probably I wouldn't go so far as villages. Villages would probably be a bit of a stretch, but like neighbouring towns, to be engaged in some sort of conflict over their religions, regardless of how religious they actually are.
Yep.
Religion being used as a pretext for, war / disagreement, when really it's actually a resources battle or something like that. And that'll feed into how the local populaces think of things too. Like if they've got different practices in worshipping the same God, hello, the three of the largest religions on earth, or two of the largest religions, and one that's particularly, attached to them, that was the source, all worship the same God in real life,
in very different ways.
The Jewish God, the Christian God, the Islamic God, all the same God. They all agree on that. That's the same God. And some of the bloodiest wars in history have been fought over how we worship this same guy. So there's no reason why you shouldn't have stuff like that built into your worlds as well, and prejudices against each other, when realistically it's about the same. They're all, they might have slightly different sects and they worship slightly differently. So there's, room for both conflict there, but it can also be used as we need to go help these guys.
Yeah.
Because, they are like us. They might not be exactly the same, but they're close enough.
Yeah.
So, but the one is like, superstitions, folk ways, and more ways. All that sort of stuff comes in. And depending on the world, the game system and sort of thing, it's going to make a big difference. Like the ones that jump to mind, though, like, can you imagine? Like, just think of everything that's in the monster manual for D&D. Like, guarantee there's going to be ways that those things impact on, like, some of the more really esoteric stuff, they're probably not so much.
Yeah.
But there is no way that a village doesn't have, maybe not necessarily a right way, but have a way of dealing with undead. Like, they've heard enough about it, and the less likely they have been to have actually been impacted by it, probably increases the chance that they've got some over-the-top response for it. And factoring that into your world as well, it sort of as we do this all the time, so that we don't do this. My favourite example of that, and I don't think I've mentioned it before, is there's a village on the edge of a swamp, and the PCs arrive, and everyone's carrying torches around, and it's the middle of the day. No one really knows why, but my daddy did it, and his daddy did it, and his daddy did it, and there's some issues in the other villages in the surrounding area, but this place doesn't seem to be having it for whatever reason. But they're all walking around carrying torches, and then one day there's some issue that stops them being able to do it, or like the shipment of some key material that they use because they don't have it locally doesn't make it in, and all of a sudden not everyone's got access to it, so they start rationing it off and going, oh well, obviously we don't need the torches at the moment during the day because it's not casting any light and we don't really know why we're carrying them anyway. So one or two people just go, oh, well, I'm going to carry one at night. Then all of a sudden the village is like, oh well, nothing bad happened to those guys, and then nothing bad happened to those next few, and then all of a sudden people start walking around a little bit at night without them, and someone's gone. And then it starts happening during the day. And it turns out that after all of this, the whole problem's been trolls. And the trolls were a problem for the town sometime in the past, and some adventurers come through 100, 200 years ago and gone, just carry torches around, they don't like it. They don't like the fire. They'll leave you alone. And over time they've forgotten that initial advice, but the carrying the torches around has been a thing. And they might even ascribe it to, at this point, to there being some god of fire or something, and that god of fire is protecting them. And when they stop doing it, all of a sudden those trolls stop raiding the other villages and go, hey, this one's closer, and it's really well built up because trolls haven't been a problem for it. Because they've been staying away from the fire. and then all of a sudden your PCs are floating around going, hey, we just go forth and slaughter some trolls in the end. But like the lead up to it is a bit of a like what the hell's going on? Like these guys are weird. Is it something cultish going on? Because it's weird behaviour. Like, and having those superstitions and folkways and things like that as something that is preventing something from happening in the world, and then have them stop doing it when the PC's around, or a PC rocks up and goes, "Why are you carrying around torches?"
Yeah,
like I literally just walked on the road into town. There's no issue whatsoever. Like, why are we? And have that be the trigger point rather than than like a rationing issue or something like that. People say, "Oh yeah, well we never really thought about it. And no one's really mentioned it before because we were sort of backwards out of the way town, and everyone just goes, we've all been doing it." Just and someone comes through and goes, "It's all weird." Yeah, so you're the first one who's actually talked to us about the fact that we're doing something weird.
So we've talked a lot about world building tonight now, and we've sort of talked about things that the GM can do. But the players also have a fairly active role in the world building and in helping the GM determine what's important for him to world, or him or her, I guess, to world build.
Definitely.
And I think a big one would be setting goals.
Yeah.
Things that your character is interested in. Like you'll start with that numbers game. I said that I want my character, his goal probably end of campaign or beyond the campaign is to reactivate the warp gates, which are based off some kind of psionic teleportation powers, which he happens to have. So yeah, it's like you set a goal that gives the GM some kind of expectation about your character and gives them something to build off.
Using that as an example, straight off the bat, I now know that if there's something crops up with regard to teleportation or hidden psychic knowledge or something like that you're going to probably jump for it. And also, if there's a reasonable place to fit that in, it's probably worth me throwing it in.
That's right. And then also, you can rely on that as a part of my character, I guess, that he will look into those sort of things. So it's good to set goals so that the GM can know what to throw out to get your character involved in the plot.
Yeah.
Even if the goal isn't necessarily related to the campaign.
If anything feels like stalling, it gives the GM something to go, all right, we're stalling out a little bit here. I know they always one of the characters are always on the lookout for this. I can throw out some information about that and then tie it back to something and get us moving again.
Yeah, that's right.
And it may either be a major point, or it could just be that it's getting them to move. And once they get moving, and they'll start generating stuff again, they've just managed to get bogged down, which sometimes just happens.
It happens even like if you're a GM. It could be the GM's fault, it could be the player's fault, it could be no one's fault. And it's just some kind of like miscommunication between the two parties. But yeah, just having the goals there to be able to go, okay, well, these sort of things will get the characters to go.
Yeah. So big thing there. One, pay attention to your characters when you're a GM, your characters' goals and your players' goals, and they need not necessarily be the same thing.
No.
How divergent they will tend to increase the more experience your players have, but sometimes, particularly if you've got anyone who's particularly creative story writing wise or something like that, or they're trying to explore something in particular, they might diverge a bit. But generally speaking, your character player goals will start off with new players will have goals in line with their characters if they've got them at all.
Yep.
And branching out from there.
It's important to, I guess, as a player, you need to play consistently towards those goals.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't necessarily have to always have the same personality, but you need to always consistently apply yourself to the same set of rules so that the GM knows what to expect. Otherwise, they've got an impossible task.
Yeah. And I suppose it's important, like, to use your game that you're running for a moment as an example. Like the only goal I've got written down anywhere for my character at that point in time, and I think we've mentioned it before, is that its goal is to own a house. I mean, that's not the greatest of fodder for a GM.
No.
But if it's a case of, hey, here's a chance to get some gold, or to go check out a space where, suddenly houses are becoming vacant or something because people are mysteriously dying off, probably a decent chance I, as a player, am going to go, hey, let's go check that out.
That's right.
And it might be an opportunity to pick up some real estate, if nothing else. But here's a lot of gold that, and it ends up being a case of, I need gold to achieve this goal. I'm now on this path here, yada yada yada. Or you could have something like, It's one of the reasons like I like Warhammer's trapping system as part of their of its moving between careers.
Yeah.
Is it sort of builds in some minor short term, or in some cases short term, in some cases quite long term goals into character progression for you as a GM. Like, well, the character, assuming that they're following a semi-normal progression, you go, oh well, I know their character's going to need. For instance, I know the character's going to need a particular type of weapon or a horse or something, and dropping some degree of hint that may be involved in as part of a reward, or like if they need a sword and it's like, oh, the town weaponsmith is having some issues, can you go help him out?
That's
Like
right.
the person who needs a sword is probably going to go, yeah, you I'll go help this guy out and maybe I'll get a deal, or a part of my cut of the reward could be this particular weapon, or
Yeah, for sure.
and having that sort of thing there. So it doesn't even. So I like having that in there as well. The other one that jumps to mind is, again, Edge of the Empire. I mentioned it a little bit earlier. One of the things it has is the obligation system. And while you've got your own goals and things as well, the idea of there being the obligation system is your character has existing obligations when you start, whether that be debt, or they're members of a organisation, or they've got a medical condition and they need to. And effectively, what it is say that you've got 4 players, it's like 20% chance that's one of that person. So I think the game requires you have 2 of them. So it's a 10% chance of each person's one, and a 20% chance that it doesn't come up in a session. It's not even in like an arc or an adventure or something. It is just do a random roll at the start of the session, and that obligation / complication should be coming up.
Yeah.
And it's something that gives, hey, well, it's going to impact the game and gets things moving, if nothing else.
Yeah.
So I like that sort of stuff where it's built into the game system as well. It helps everyone out a bit.
Yeah.
But even in those games that don't have those things, I definitely 100% agree that having those character backstories and leaning into them as a player is a good thing, because the goals on the character sheet aren't worth what they're the paper they're written on.
Yeah.
If you're not actually
Pursuing them.
Yeah. So if you're a player and you tell your GM that you've got goals, be on the lookout for them. I mean, some GMs may not wrap them in or something. They may not fit what they're trying to do. They may not be paying attention. They might they might be running a module and not feel able to branch out, or any number of reasons. But if you're at least looking out for that sort of stuff, and most GMs will try and tag it in there somewhere.
Yeah. Alright, well, I think we've pretty much covered every point we've got written down. And I don't really want to jump on to the next point yet, because we've got to finish in about 15-20 minutes anyway. So let's open it up to some questions. I'm going to take a quick break whilst we wait for the first lot of questions. So I'll be back in just a second.
I suppose we'll wait for those to come through. I can touch off a little bit on tying backstory into goals. It's one thing to have each of those 2 things, but they should be cohesive. Like, if your character's of noble birth and has been raised in it's an environment where all their needs are met, like, their goal is probably not going to be attaining that. For an interesting character, I mean, if they're in a situation where they lost that as part of their backstory and re-attaining it, definitely that's cohesive. It makes sense. But they're having their goal be more, I need to get out and get struck rich on my own so that I can make be myself, and away from the strictures of nobility and the restrictions upon my activity.
Right, here we go. questions?
Not as of yet. I'm trying to figure out if there's a delay involved still.
Should be that long, about 45 seconds. I think it's even less. Alright, that's okay. I'm sure we can expand a little bit on some things that we've done. So,
Yeah.
how about we talk about Dawn of Worlds a little bit?
Yeah, definitely.
Using like a mechanical system to build a world.
Yeah, as a group,
As a group,
nonetheless.
yeah. Instead of just doing it yourself and generating the whole world yourself, you generate it as a group at the table.
Yeah. Dawn of Worlds, love it. I think the biggest issue with it is its first, what it refers to as its first age, which is really sort of building the land mass in the world itself.
Drawing out the map and placing the terrain, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest impediment to use.
Mhm.
So I think last time we did it, we skipped that sort of age and just went like, here's the world with 4 minutes, just assume that it's being, and we grabbed a map from somewhere and just assume that the world is formed as part of the creation process, and then random rolled a starting amount of power for everybody and went you butte.
Yeah, that's what we did last time. I don't know. I think I think if I did it again, I would do at least 1 or 2 rounds in that sort of
Yes,
first
some
age
degree of manipulation.
to give you some manipulation and to also let you customize some things for what you want to do.
Yeah.
Because if you have even if you have every biome imaginable, there's going to be something that people want to do that they sort of limited to, and you can still edit it. Part of his goals that may or may not necessarily be tied directly into the story of the game. For example, in D&D, we want you to eventually form an adventuring group. Yeah, that's a really good idea. Like, well, we semi-touched on that a little bit, but having like your party have a goal that's not necessarily beat the big bad guy is probably a really good thing for the campaign, to be honest.
Yeah. One, the goal doesn't disappear if they've managed to beat the big bad guy, and 2, it gives them something to come back to if there's if they need some downtime.
That's right, man.
Yeah, like the adventurers guild, starting an adventuring guild is a good example of that. Well, one, there's an impetus there to go forth and make cash. So, because they're going to need some capital to get started. Well, all of a sudden, then they might get distracted from the main quest line by the fact that there's a big payday on offer somewhere for something, or they may feel a need to do things that are more big notey to get their name out there when they otherwise wouldn't.
That's right. I was thinking, maybe they'll try and go and do some more jobs in regards to like the nobility and things like that to try and get the nobility to give them the favours that they need to pass the local council or whatever. So definitely that's a really good point and a really good idea too, to have your players come up with some goals that aren't necessarily tied to the specific events of the game, that give you something else to feed off and feed into.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that becoming a focus for a time, whether it be a session or a couple of sessions or something. I mean, unless you've got a particularly heavy time crunch on whatever else is going on.
I'd suggest trying to avoid that a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, pretty much every campaign I've ever played in, I felt like I was under the pump. And then, I always felt like I was up racing against the clock to try and take the big bad down. And it's something that I've been toying with myself fairly recently, is just moving that clock over like months or years instead of weeks.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why I also picked going with Stars Without Numbers for my current game, because it was something that had a lot of support there for a lot of things going on in the background, but didn't rest on the idea of there necessarily being a big bad or a big good or a major thing going on. It was just a fact of you're on a sector, like a space sector wide scale. Everywhere's got problems. There's so many problems and things like that going on. You've got no hope in a world of being able to deal with everything. So it gives you the freedom to not.
Yeah.
Like I find that in smaller games, smaller scoped games in particular, it's easier to get stuck onto a path of, we've got to deal with these goblins because they're really messing with the town, and we're stuck here too. So we've got to go do that. And then we get on to the next thing. And then we find out that's caused by this. And all of a sudden, you're like 10 levels deep. But it's actually been like 2 months.
That's right, yeah.
And it doesn't make sense. Whereas things that require a bit more travel time, there's no sort of hard clock on things. It's something I'm looking at. Because again, I've often fallen into the same sort of situation that you have. Probably by virtue of the fact that we've played together a lot. As well as run games for each other and things. Is that feeling that there's always a clock on this, we've got to deal with this is always coming up. And I think that's probably one area where, at least not recently, have we been in situations where it's like, just go forth and look around and
And I think it's a good idea to have a bit of downtime in your world where the players can go and explore, like, I don't know, just the local area and get to know the NPCs and build that sort of rapport. And then also they have time to do things like crafting and professions and, have that fallback where they're like, okay, well, I've got a bajillion gold. I'm going to buy a little hut, a little tavern and, start operating some stuff out of there. And maybe I'll start a little information network. And then there's something that you can exploit later. But yeah, having something that's not necessarily tied directly to the campaign is probably a very, very good point.
And as we said, like, it gives the option there for, like, if the game ends, in terms of they kill the big bad or foil his plan or capture them or whatever, there's immediately something there for them to go back. Hey, they own the tavern. They're going to go back and celebrate. Guaranteed. If they go kill a dragon, that thing's head is going back to that tavern.
That's right.
Like, there is no way in the world that it's going anywhere else.
That's right. And it just, it just makes it makes the world feel alive. Yeah. But you've got to be willing as a GM to work with them and work and exploit that.
Yeah. And that's why I think there's been a couple of attempts, the groups that you and I have had recently, to get sort of more back towards that. Like, we had the crack at the hex crawl sort of kingmaker one, which never really got off the ground.
Didn't get off the ground to pan out, so we don't know if it would have or not, to be honest.
So we don't know whether or not it would work out, but something harkening back to that more adventuristic style of game, as opposed to just, we need to go save the world or kill all the things, or just a case of go forth and look around, and if you run into stuff, you run into stuff. Or, go forth, make money, make your way in the world.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I did run a game that was meant to go like that, but it got destroyed by Christmas destroying my momentum.
Yeah.
A few other things that I wasn't happy with. So
yeah, that's a lesson for you too, for GMs and players alike. Sometimes things like a Christmas break, while necessary because people are away or for whatever, through no fault of anyone's, can kill a campaign's momentum, and all of a sudden you get back and you're like, where were we? Like, what are we feeling? I'm like, I'm not on the, like, what was I planning?
That's right. And the big problem for me is that as I was GMing, but I was in management at the time, and Christmas time for me went from like fairly reasonable 40 to 50 hours a week to 60 to 80 hours a week worth of work. It's like, it took me out of commission for the better part of a month and a half, as opposed to the week or so of Christmas.
So it was a complete, sort of block on getting anything done, which is annoying because, being in the same group, that sort of time where you kicked right off for having insanity is the one time of year that I don't.
Yeah.
It's the one time that we've got mandatory required shutdowns at work and things like that.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden I was free. And I think that's something that's owed to led to my massive prep style of gaming, is because I tend to get chunks of time of nothing and then work a lot. Generally.
Yeah.
So, if I can sit down and build a world over 2 weeks, I can't play a lot in that time, but I can build a lot. And a lot of that, and before that there was being away for university and things like that, where I, depending on which year or whatever I was in, I was, had bursts, like that sort of lots of role playing, then not a lot, and lots of role playing and then not a lot.
Yeah.
And, and that could also sync up with the not a lot syncing up with not a lot else to do either, so that and I think that could be where a lot of my style of GMings come from.
Yeah.
Whereas
well, I've always been, ever since I was like 17, I was a manager, so I was always heavily under the pump, with very, very time poor. So a lot of my prep came from a lot of my prep being so loosey goosey has come from the necessity of the fact that I didn't have time to prep, but I wanted to run a game and I had a lot of time to think. So I didn't have time to write the mechanics of the things down, but I had the time to come up with interesting plots and interesting stories that worked well. So a lot of my DMing prep isn't so much mechanics based; it's more plot based.
Yeah. So the world you live in, impact. I think what we're taking from this is that it makes a big impact on your style, as much as what you've played and the groups you've been with and things like that as well, because time is a factor.
So I'll quickly check, because we got a message through the week from one of the members in regards to some stuff to do with GMing. And I think it was how to info dump, like how to transfer information. And the piece of advice that I originally gave was don't try to monologue information in terms of a big bad, because while in a video game it works because they put a big shield around him and you can't hurt them. At a table that feels cheese, so for the most part the PC is just going to kill them while they're monologuing. Yeah. So monologuing doesn't really work at a gaming table as much as it does in like a movie.
Well, I suppose the advice in that sort of scenario is drip feed over time as opposed to dump is probably the big thing, or post-combat access to information.
Yeah, well, he actually came up with a good point himself fairly quickly. Probably even in his opening question, he said that he was thinking about having like a quest hub or like a village or something where they could speak to various people, and that would be how they would get their information and their quests. And I was like, yeah, that's probably the way to go, because if you have like a pressing goal and they're just always trying to push towards it, you do lose a lot of that being at a time where you can give information, and it's hard to convey the information that the villain's trying to give without monologuing. Yeah. And it's hard to have that information. Like, it starts to become very cheesy that the villain's always writing there at night time before they go to bed, they're writing their dream journal. Yeah. Like, it starts to feel a bit cheese. So you sort of do need to have that interaction with the villagers and the people and the guards and the people that give the rumours and so on.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm a big fan of a couple of things. One is you don't always need to specify it exactly. Mm-hmm. A couple of things. Some things will come across based off what your villain does. Mm-hmm. So if you've got a villain and you want them to be... the idea behind them is that they're greedy and ruthless. Mm-hmm. Well, have some of the things that they're doing reflect that without you actually needing to necessarily say it or have somebody tell it. Like, if it's the fact that they're, ruthless, their guards, are particularly, like their henchmen who are out doing stuff are particularly ruthless. Mm-hmm. Having said that, an interesting twist to throw on that one at the end is they're actually absent-minded. Like, they've just hired a couple of guys to go take care of it. Like, they're so engrossed in whatever their grand work is that their lieutenants are sort of running amok. Mm-hmm. And you could have built up this grand idea that there's this massively evil person at the end.
Mm-hmm. But then there's not.
You subvert it when it just turns out that, Wizard Y working on whatever has contracted out like the defense of his area to mercenary company X, and part of the agreement was you get to keep any like gold or whatever that you manage to retrieve from the things that you get, the things you defeat. And they've gone off on like, well, this guy's got the authority in this location for whatever reason, he's contracted us to do this and we're able to do that, and the wording of it is that we get to keep whatever we defeat in combat. Whatever somebody defeated in combat, so that mercenary groups effectively become bandits. Mm-hmm. But old mate who's up in the top of the tower doesn't realise it. All he knows is that the goblins in the area have stopped bugging him.
That's really a good point.
So, one, it's good to give ideas based on what henchmen and lieutenants and stuff like that do. And some of the information coming from defeated lieutenants is also interesting as well, rather than giving it all in one solid monologue somewhere along the line.
That's right. And also having information come from other sources outside of the thing, like villages or whatever, but having some of the information be incorrect.
Yeah. That's probably the biggest one, is really to keep it, keep a mix of incorrect in there if it's not, like, even if it is direct source information. Mm-hmm. Like, your villain might be putting on airs that they're really ruthless, but truly it's eating them up a bit, but the reason they're doing it is because there's a bigger issue out there. Mm-hmm. Like, when you defeat the King in Fable 3 or whatever it was, and it's like, oh, by the way, you need to raise this much gold within the next 6 months to pay for all the required works and defences and things for this other big thing that's coming.
For this far bigger, far scarier enemy that's coming.
It's like, I was ruthless, but I'm being ruthless for a reason. Mm-hmm. And that sort of trade-off as well. Or if it's just a case of, the village is afraid of the tower that's outside it, and they see random lights shining from it, and they're convinced that it's, random spectres or something. And it's just like Wizard's backup tower that he occasionally goes through and gives it a bit of a, like, I forgot something, I left it behind there, teleports in, and the teleportation manifests as like a lightning strike on it. Or he's got a couple of like arcane servitors or something that wander around the joint, and like they're convinced that it's evil and that there's these unliving creatures wandering around defending it. And you rock up there and it's just a couple of automated, like constructs butlers. Just wandering around the joint, doing basic repairs and stuff, and on guard duty, and they might react poorly to things. Like it's like, you find out that the reason why they're convinced that they're evil is because some kid went up and prodded one at some point, and because it's got like poor instructions, it like the construct just interpreted like the stick poking it as like a club attack and like whooped a kid, and then the story's just gone nuts from there, or strange lights, and it's just superstition, like, oh, there's this evil up here, and they attribute something to it, or using the Wizard's Tower again or something, like they've seen activity in this tower recently, and the wizards moved back in, but it's like an elven wizard or something who's been gone doing something for like 100 years and has just come home. Like to him, he's been away for like the equivalent of a sabbatical for 6 months over in Waterdeep, and he's come back and fired everything back up again. So now there's this weird outsider who's showing up around town. He's not one of us because there's no elves in town, because it's a little hamlet in the middle of a human kingdom somewhere. And this guy, hasn't been back in 3 or 4 generations or something, so no one knows about him. And he's just sort of set up shop in his tower, and he's requesting delicacies and weird things that he needs for his arcane experiments, which if he was ordering through a trader in Waterdeep or something, no one would bat an eye. But they backwards town, like, what? Doesn't know. So like, there's this evil witch in this tower now, and him being back, he starts dealing with some issues in the area, like big issues that had crawled in. But those big issues were actually keeping minor things sort of in check. Like, he took out the gang boss, but now there's a gang war over who the new boss is going to be amongst the goblins and the kobolds. Now that some, like, a gang of trolls or something that had been keeping everything in check and really, running the show and keeping some semblance of, I don't want to use the word order because it's pretty chaotic, but, there's some degree of unity going on there, even if it's unity under fear. And he's gone... lightning bolt and killed it, and just doesn't care about anything below a certain plateau because it's not his problem. They should be able to handle it.
Definitely. And I think in terms of, you got to really, I think if you're going to give information to the party, you need to think about what they want in terms of information. So he said he had a problem where they killed a lot of things very quickly, and I'm like, well, you've just got to murder every party, there's not much you can do about that. You've just got to start to sort of give information in a way that they'll accept it.
Yeah, and they may not be interested. It's just the end, right? And if it's impacting on your fun as running, is like your idea of what you're getting fun out of is, you wanted to have this thing and it's not working for you, and you're actually finding it a bit boring because all you're doing is crafting encounters from week to week. Maybe it's time to have the conversation. Go, hey guys, I'm not really feeling it at the moment. I feel at the moment really all I'm doing is creating encounters and stuff, and I want to try something a little different. Or if you guys aren't interested in that, maybe I can play for a while and one of you guys can have a crack, and see if maybe you're quite happy to go and play that style of just hack and slash bigger and pretzels game, and someone might be fun to have, quite fine to step up and just run and go, oh yep, sure, I like playing. I like the combat. I like the thought that goes into creating the encounters and stuff like that. So sometimes it's just a case of there's a mismatch in those situations.
Yeah, that's right.
But you can start. I would agree with Tom in the sense of start like attaching the information that you're providing to what the group's trying to do. If they're just trying to like find the next thing to kill, rather than always going with they go back to the Adventurers Guild or wherever it is, they're going to their hub in town to get another work order to go kill goblins or whatever. Start dripping it in, and like on the way back you run into something, and they go, oh yeah, we ran into an issue with they run into a caravan and they go, oh yeah, but they look a bit beat up, and their response is, oh, we ran into a pack of like giant wolves, about a half day's journey back or something, and start instead of like weaning them off of we go back to the Quest Hub every time to, we're getting this information's coming in from other sources. And start with that sort of thing, and then build towards potentially giving information that's less directly.
That's a really good one too. Like, I didn't even think about giving that as an example when he was asking. Like, having NPCs out in the world give the information as well, not just back at home. So like you said, the caravan coming along saying that there's they got attacked just down the road. It's really good information for the party to get. But it wasn't something I thought about. So that's a really good idea.
And it's I suppose the thing there is really that it starts priming them for the idea that, hey, if we listen to these other individuals that are floating around, we might pick up something that will still get us to where we want to be. And some of them might find that, well, then you start weaving in a little bit of intrigue into it, and then if they don't pick up on that intrigue, or it doesn't seem to it, no harm, no foul, but someone might go, all right, well, that's now wolves and goblins all on this one stretch of road. Like, why this stretch of road?
Yeah.
And then they might start off in search of more information and things. It's not always going to be that someone's going to rock up to you one day and go, hey, I want a more investigatory sort of game, or a more world-driven game, or something like that.
It's hard to come up with where you fit on that spectrum too, where you fit on I like combat, I like role-playing, I like this, because, chances are you like a bit of everything, but it's sort of hard to determine exactly where you fit.
Yeah, and if you've got a mismatch in your party, your team, your group, your whatever particular nomenclature you want to use for the people you roleplay with, it's going to take a while before you balance out to somewhere as well.
That's right.
And there might be a degree of case where there's some people at the table who are really hack and slave. It's all right for them to tune out in the other parts of the game, as long as they're not being disruptive.
That's right.
And just go, look, we're not interested in this part, and show up for combat. And vice versa. Like the guy, you got 2 or 3 guys that are more skill based and are about solving problems in town. Yeah, the guys who are combatants, work as lookouts while they do the skill based things. And then when the skill based thing's sort of done, and the rogue triggers the trap that's not like a dart trap, but it's actually oh no, we released a couple of constructs or something. They run like hell because they can't survive it, but then the 2 warriors step forward and beat the living snot out of things.
Yeah, that's right.
Like
give everyone the spotlight, but doesn't necessarily.
It gets a little harder when you start dealing combat, non-combat, I suppose, in the sense that combat can end up taking a long time, and if they're not really involved, but start working stuff into the combat. It's not necessarily that.
You just start dropping in some things into the combat that the skill monkeys can do.
Yeah, they might not want to go in and fight, but I'd say steer towards environmental effects there. Things like, all right, the skill monkey can climb up that and release that and change the battlefield, or drop a chandelier on their heads, or have those sort of things. And probably the first couple of times start calling out opportunities for them, so that they can see that thing and they're aware that you're having that as an option. And then they'll start picking it up themselves. Particularly, and this is one of the times where I'm going to rapidly suggest before I say this, I have no problem with video games. I play a lot of them myself. If new players who are coming from a video game background quite often will have the book says I can do this, therefore that's the sort of thing I can do. I can attack, I can do this, and they have that, and it's all really tied to that. There's not necessarily that amount of lateral thinking that goes into, well, maybe instead of attacking this turn, I can smash my hammer up against this bit of cobblestone wall that looks a bit, like the mortar's let go a bit, and create some difficult terrain so it's hard for the thing to move around, or throw out a whole bunch of caltrops or something like that. And some of that will come back to the GM talking about things like, the loose architecture, or there's, the chandelier swinging from the ceiling. And making sure that sort of thing's said. So to start with, I wouldn't rely on players to say, hey, is there a chandelier or something I can drop on these guys? I'd start with things like, you're in the room, there's this, and the lighting is via a chandelier, and when you have a bit of a look around the room, you find you're sort of patting it on a curtain or something, and there's something behind you, pull it apart, and there's like where the rope connects for the thing, and then combat happens later. And then maybe have something, and then maybe throw something in there, like if there's a ranged combatant or something on one of the sides gets knocked and has a horrible miss, like you make a mention of, and the arrow pings off of the chandelier as a reminder that it's there in combat.
Yeah, but you can always, if you like sort of start to, you want to get them to do things like that, you can always have a miss from either side, hit the chandelier and knock it down, sort of thing, to sort of give them the idea that that's something that they could do.
Or, and this one's probably a little harsher, is have an enemy do it. The chandelier is probably a one-off thing, but if they attempt to, bull rush you into a pit and that's there and fail, all of a sudden, wait a second, I'm going to lure these guys in. Or, if your players are bedded down in a room in a dungeon or something, have the goblins light a fire at the other side of the door or something like that. Give them ideas for things that they can do in the future as well. Yeah, there's a degree of, you get experience in the game in terms of character level experience, but some other stuff comes from experience as well, and sometimes you need to be exposed to it to learn it.
Yeah, that's right.
And just because there's nothing wrong with the players going, these goblins did this to us, we're going to get them back fivefold, and we're going to burn this fucker to the ground. That sort of thing will happen all the time. Or somebody will, one of the ones that jumps to mind is a game, we'll jump back to Saga Star Wars or something, get into a fight with another Force user and they do something, you're like, I don't remember seeing that power. What the fuck was that? Is it in the book? What can I find? Can I learn that?
Yeah.
Or, they use use the Force to move something, and it's like, and instead of like slamming it up someone, all they've done is they've just like plugged a gap or something, and it's stopped water from running into an area, and now the whole, there's a slick muddy field there in the middle where the water was previously flowing, but there's now options that are opened up by that no longer being underwater. You can slog through it now, whereas before you would have been washed away and you were sort of trapped on one side of the river. Yeah. Like having enemies do little things like that is a good chance to start giving those ideas to players for things that they can do in the future too.
Start listening to the description of the room and coming up with ideas based on that. Yeah. Cool. All right, well, we probably should end there because I need to strip this room out completely before tomorrow.
Woohoo.
Because we're getting a new shelving system put in, so hopefully next week I'll be able to show it off.
Just walk around with the webcam.
Alrighty, well thanks for listening, and thanks for your questions, and we'll see you next week.